Hello everyone and welcome to today's session on Agile Project Management full course by Intellipaat. The meaning of Agile is swift or versatile. Agile process model refers to a software development approach based on iterative development. Agile methods break tasks into smaller iterations or paths that do not directly involve into long-term planning. The project scope and the requirements are laid down at the beginning of the development process itself. Plans regarding the number of iterations, the duration and the scope of each iterations are clearly defined in advance. In this session, we will learn all about Agile and all its properties. So without further wait, let's check the agenda for the session.
Before we talk about Agile, we first need to understand what is SDLC. So, within a software organization, Software Development Life Cycle or SDLC is a detailed strategy and adaptability. An agile or iterative strategy strives to deliver benefits throughout the process rather than just at the end. Trust, adaptability, empowerment, and cooperation should all be essential ideals and behaviors in agile initiatives. With that being said, let's move on to our next agenda, the tenets of an agile approach. The agile ideology emphasizes empowered individuals and their relationship as well as early and consistent value delivery into an organization. When the pressure to perform is greater than the risk, agile project management focuses on providing maximum value against business priorities in the time and money allotted. The following are some of the principles. The project divides the requirement into smaller chunks, which the team then ranks in order of importance. Collaboration is encouraged in the agile project, especially with the customer. At frequent intervals, the agile project reflects, learns, and adjusts to guarantee that the customer is always satisfied and that the benefits are delivered. Agile approaches combine planning and execution, allowing a company to develop a working attitude that enables a team to adjust quickly to changing needs. Now let's take a look at the key components of an agile approach. Agile project management primarily has 6 key components, and they are user stories. Simply put, a user story is a high level description of a task. It gives just enough information for the team to come up with a credible estimate of the time it will take to complete the request. This brief, straightforward explanation is written from the user's point of view and focuses on describing what your client wants and why do they want so. Next, we have product roadmap creation. A roadmap is a list of features that will be included in the final product. Because your team will construct these specific features throughout each sprint, this is an important part of an agile planning cycle. You will also create a product backlog at this time, which is a list of all the features and deliverables that will go into the final product. Your team will extract tasks from this backlog when planning sprints later. Next, we have sprint planning. Before each sprint begins, the stakeholders must attend a sprint planning meeting to identify what each individual will do during the sprint, how it will be accomplished, and assess the task load. It's critical to equally distribute the workload among team members so that they can complete their assigned duties during the sprint. For team openness, shared understanding, and detecting and reducing bottlenecks, you will also need to visually describe your workflow. Next, we have sprint. Sprints are short iterations of 1 to 3 weeks in length, during which teams focus on tasks set out at the sprint planning meeting. As time goes on, the goal is to keep repeating these sprints until your product is future ready. After the sprint, you analyze the product to see what is working and what is not, make improvements, and start a new sprint to improve the product or service. Next, we have the stand up meetings. Daily stand up meetings, often known as daily Scrum meetings, are an excellent approach to keep everyone on track and informed. These meetings are usually short and to the point. Last component that we have here is backlog. Project requests become outstanding stories in the backlog as they are added through your intake mechanism. Your team will estimate narrative points for each task during agile planning meetings. Stories from the backlog are added into the sprint to be performed during the iteration that is done during sprint preparation. In an agile context, managing your backlog is critical for project managers. With that being the last component, Let's move on to our next agenda, that is the methods involved. As Agile became a popular topic at the turn of the century, numerous frameworks jumped on the bandwagon and quickly rose to prominence, like Scrum, etc. Many firms pursuing true business agility, on the other hand, discovered that overly prescriptive frameworks and agility are diametrically opposed. Kanban, Scrum, and Scrumban are the most prominent agile project management frameworks or approaches that are present today. Let's start with Kanban. It is a method that was developed over a decade ago. It focuses on ongoing process improvement and evolutionary development. The six key practices of the technique are as follows: improve cooperation by visualizing work, limiting work in progress, managing flow, making process policies explicit, implementing feedback loops, and improving collaboratively. Next up, we have Scrum. Many people mistake Scrum for an agile methodology, although it is essentially a prescriptive framework. It is an iterative approach that divides projects into set periods called sprints and uses time boxed intervals. The primary goal is to assist teams in delivering high value products in a productive and creative manner. There are three roles that cannot be changed in a Scrum: owner of the product, the Scrum Master, and the team. Customers and other stakeholders are represented by the product owner. He or she organizes and manages the product backlog, which is a priority task list of all the product's work items. The Scrum Master, on the other hand, is a servant leader of the team who focuses on leadership and assists everyone in understanding and applying the rules appropriately. And lastly, we have Scrumban. As Kanban became increasingly popular, individuals in the Agile community recognized an opportunity to create a system that allows Scrum teams to focus on continuous improvement and evolutionary change while moving forward. Scrumban was born as a result of this. It's worth noting that 81% of Scrum Masters use Kanban in addition to Scrum. Scrumban applies Kanban's concepts and practices to Scrum while also removing some rules. Now let's move on to our next agenda, that who are the users or who uses Agile project management. The Agile project management approach, which was originally developed for software development, is increasingly being adopted by more than just ID teams. Marketers, universities, the military, and even the automobile industry are using it. Agile methodologies and frameworks to develop creative products in difficult circumstances. Agile project management may help a wide range of enterprises, and it's simple to set up and use. When deciding to establish or improve existing technology in the software sector, the ultimate product can be difficult to describe. Agile allows for this ambiguity since it enables project direction to alter as work progresses into the future. While Agile software, books, and coaches can help you put together an Agile methodology that works for you and your team, each Agile team is unique, and understanding the basics can help you build together an Agile methodology that works for you and your team. Now let's move on to the benefits of Agile working. The first benefit that we have here is Agile methods empower people involved, hence increasing accountability, promoting a variety of ideas, allowing early benefits release, and promoting ongoing improvement. Second benefit is Agile can be effective in promoting cultural change, which is important to the success of most transformation projects because changes are progressive and evolutionary rather than revolutionary. As a result, it can assist in creating client and user involvement. Agile permits decision gremlins to be tried and rejected early, whereas the waterfall model does not. Agile's tight feedback loops bring benefits that, again, the waterfall model does not.
But before we begin the session, make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you'll never miss any update from us.
So, understanding and identifying the right development lifecycle model is essentially important for any application development successful. It's not only about how technically are we strong, but it is equally important to understand the right development lifecycle models. So whatever are we going to discuss about Agile and all, everything is connecting to that. So let me explain you in a high level note about the different models which are available, wherein you can see on the screen here. So there are different models of software development lifecycle. I'm just naming few. I'm not going in detail. So the first model we call it as waterfall model. Waterfall is a kind of model which is also called as linear sequential model. So where we have whatever the analysis, planning, design, implementation, testing, or whatever we have, everything will happen one after another, so that there will be of no deviation, nothing. So once the analysis is completed, we go for planning and design. Followed by this, we go for implementation of the project, testing, all that stuff, one after another. This is a kind of model which is traditional on its approach, using by us for a very long time. At the same time, this is a kind of model which is having its own success rate in application development, but make sure the requirements, whatever customer has given, should not have any kind of changes in between. Right? So when there is an assurance given by the client that no changes in requirements taken place, this waterfall model is highly useful. This is the first model. So this model, of course, even nowadays, even waterfall model underline we use, because when someone are new to Agile or someone are new to application development, this is the model which is rightly useful for everyone. The next model we call it as V model. This V model will also called as verification and validation model. Here both verification and validation happen sequentially. Means whenever we have limited time, because in the first model of V model we don't have any when there is no time restriction, no duration restriction, that model is highly useful. Which one? Waterfall. Because sometimes customer has approached us to develop the project, to complete and provide the whole project. Assume that it is taking 8 months to 1 year. Assume that, right? Roughly I'm saying. When customer is accepting you, at the same time when customer is accepting you that no changes will be taken place in between, waterfall is the best one. The second model is called as V model. V model means verification and validation, where whatever the development activity followed by the testing activity happens parallelly. Means testing team will start working right from the requirement analysis phase itself, usually, right? Because whenever we have taken the requirements from the BA will take all the requirements, right? So we try to analyze the requirements. We try to identify why are these requirements are important, how to understand the requirements. So whenever in this process, even testing team will also work parallelly. Means what requirements we have taken and what must be the output, right? That is what generally testing team will prepare. This is all happens through manual process. Because in testing, there will be two different things. One is manual, second is automation. Manual testing means they prepare different test cases, test plans, test scripts, all that. Whereas automation testing means using different tools, something like Selenium and all, everything, code will be tested accordingly. So based on the code, whatever they are tested, if they have identified bugs, that will be prepared as a report again on the document. Again, this will be submitted to the implementation team so that they will do the corrections accordingly. This is how generally the process will go on. So this V is a model, verification and validation model, majorly used when we have a limited time, means when we have a limited amount of time we have, whenever we want to complete it as earliest. This V model is highly useful, where both development as well as testing happens parallelly. Means whatever the work we do in the development phase, even before coding starts, even because before coding starts there are a lot many things, right? So we need to understand the requirements. Once we have understood the requirements, we have to classify them, we have to prioritize the requirements. After prioritization, we have to understand the requirements. Whatever the prioritization we have made, we need to understand whether the requirements were right or not, right? So is this requirements were sufficient? So once the requirements we have identified, everything was finalized, then requirements communication. This is where generally this PRD, SRS, all these things comes into picture. So after that, we do the designing part, followed by the design, coding will be done. So whatever the activity from the development perspective as well as the testing perspective happens sequentially. This is what we call it as V model. So whenever we have a limited time, V model is something highly useful and desirable. This is the second model. The third model, rather than the model, third and fourth are considered as incremental and iterative approaches. Rather than the model, the best part of the thing I tell you is that incremental and as well as iterative are the approaches. Because underlying, whenever we are working on agile environment, this incremental and iterative will be used, because these are the approaches. The best part of saying these two things are approaches. So what is incremental model? Incremental model means in each and every phase, each and every build of the application we do, we are adding new things into that. I'll give you best example. I think last time I have given, I hope. Let me repeat the same if not. Let's say there is a customer page, a login page which was created. whatever we have created, whatever the login page we have created so far, login page was created. We have given all the user ID, password, all the details is given. Now, in between, customer wants you to add some second level verification. Means second level verification process is what customer is expecting. Means first level verification process done, login ID, password was given. Customer wants to have an additional security. For that reason, they want a two-step verification process. Again, the second step verification process, either we get a password OTP number to our registered mobile number, so that we have to give, so that it will be logged in, right? So assume that this is the second step of verification. In terms of the security, this is what generally the customer is planned. So where are we doing these add-ons? This we are doing these add-ons and all everything on the second build. It means each and every phase of development. Phase means once the implementation everything done. Wherever in the second build, we are adding new more things into that. This is what generally incremental stands for. Means each and every phase of implementation, we are adding new increments into the existing ones. This is what we call it as incremental model stands for. Followed by incremental model, the next is iterative model or iterative process or approach, I can say. Iterative approach, where we are working on something, giving it to the customer. As long as customer is not accepted, we don't go to the next level. This is what iterative process means. We are providing more value services to the customer by adding some new things, doing some changes and all everything into that. Right? So this is how generally iterative process is. So these are the traditional ones. Whatever we have discussed so far, either it is a waterfall model or it may be a V model or it is incremental or iterative. All these processes are the traditional ones which we are using for a very long time. Now, due to the changes and volatility in requirements taken place nowadays, because nowadays, as you know, any enterprise, especially, everything is competitive, right? So whatever the services they are providing today may not be by tomorrow, right? So tomorrow they have to come up with a new thing. This is how the market and industry has changed, evolved. So we have to run along with that, right? So then only existency will be there for any enterprise. So customer requires lot of changes to be made into the existing one sometimes, or else they may require to add some new things and all everything into the existing ones, or else to develop a new application or a new technology they want to implement. So this is a continuous process for any enterprise nowadays. They're expecting means they're expecting an application to be completed in very less time, that too a quality out, because quality they don't want to compromise, but they want things to be completed within less time. But the practical difficulty is, as it's a human intervention, because end of the day, whatever the coding we do, whatever the testing, design part, diagrams we prepare, architecture, everything is being connecting with human, right? So manpower, people has to do it. It's not by robots, remember. So human intervention is involved more. So there will be some desired timelines which are essentially required for us to complete. But unfortunately, some people, customers, doesn't have the time to wait due to multiple reasons. Maybe they have their own reasons for that. So there are possibilities that they may not have that much time to wait to that extent possible. So they require some kind of approach which can suits their condition. Means what are their condition? One is they want their application to be completed in very less time, that too in a quality output they have to expect, they are expecting, right? These are the major things which they are expecting. But the traditional ones what we have discussed so far doesn't have that provision to do that. That's the reason why Agile is the model or Agile is a methodology. Apart from all that, I can say Agile is a way of approach which was introduced nowadays. Of course, nowadays means not now, recently. From past 8 to 10 years, Agile was there, of course, in very limited in percentage, not more aggressively. But nowadays, of course, everybody were understood the importance of Agile, and slowly adoption in their processes is taking place. That's a different story anyway, right? So slowly the implementation and as well as the importance of Agile has increased. Agile is something suitable for the present condition which customers are expecting. That's the reason why importance of Agile is more nowadays, right? So I'm going to discuss about Agile, because whatever we have completed so far about the waterfall, V model, incremental, iterative, all that we have completed. And now I'm going to discuss about Agile. So what is Agile is all about? Why Agile? For what reason we are using Agile? All that. So these are the three different points we need to discuss here. The first point is why Agile, for what reason Agile is. Second point, for what Agile is being used for. And the third, is it Agile is confined only to IT companies or not, right? These are the 3 points we need to discuss first. Then we go for what are the different values and principles of Agile we have, followed by this why Scrum, right? So what is the difference between Scrum and XP, Scrum and Kanban, right? So all that will be discussed in the later on stage. Now let us discuss about why Agile. As I told you earlier, customer wants the project has to be whatever the solution. Let us understand from the perspective of a solution has to be completed in very less time. That too, delivery should have a value. Quality delivery has to be done. For that reason, Agile is being used in application development nowadays. Means whatever the requirement customer is having, whatever customer is expecting us to complete, we are completing in very less time and we are delivering it to the extent possible, whatever the quality we can provide to the client. But the advantage in Agile is whatever the implementation we do, whatever the release we do, everything is under small iterations. Because in Agile, we do small iterations. Assume that, for example, to have a clear and simple understanding, I'll tell you. To complete a project called a core banking, let us understand a core banking is an application we are developing. Right from analysis to deployment, delivery, followed till delivery, assume that it takes 12 months time for you to complete. Now, what is that we are doing? We are dividing. It is to make you simple. I am giving this example, making it more simple. So what is that we can do? We can divide into 3 different parts. Every 4 months, there is a release, or every 3 months, there is a release. Hence, there will be 4 different releases. So 4 3s are 12, or 3 into 4, 12. Right? This is how it is. So every 3 months, there is a release we are planning, or every 4 months, we are planning a release. Whatever is required for the particular release is what the parameter. Hence, we are not focusing on the whole application. The advantage in Agile is, especially in reference to the team I am saying, whoever is involving in Agile, they need not be focusing on the whole application. So their focus must be only for the particular timeline, which is somewhere around near to about 3 to 4 months of time. Right. So assume that if it is 3 months time of release, whatever is required in the first coming 3 months is what the plan of action team will be focused more on. So once it is done, then next again we plan for the second release, third release, fourth release, and so on. Right? This is how generally the process will happen. So this is possible when we want to implement Agile, because the structure as well as the value system which Agile is having, whatever the principle and as well as the structure of Agile is something suitable to that. This is one advantage. At the same time, the other advantage is that if there is any kind of changes to be made in between, because in the beginning itself I told you volatility in requirements will be more, because whatever the offer, whatever the changes and whatever the process they were implementing or whatever the strategy they were implementing today may be outdated for the next couple of days sometimes. Right, due to the different domains it varies. So there is a constant changes on the existing requirements which might be taken required in between. This is not possible something in the traditional way of approach, because every requirement is being, whatever the functional and non-functional requirements we are developing, everything was interconnected. At the same time, whatever the requirements we are writing, everything will be written in a documentation format and we are implementing the same way as it is. But whereas in Agile, the approach of writing down the requirements and all everything in a different format, that is how generally user story we call it as. User story format it is. Means each and every user story is having independent on its nature, so that there is no connect with other user story, so that whatever the implementation, whatever the changes we want to make out of it can be changed accordingly. So that this is how generally one example I'm saying. So these are the ways where Agile is more extensively using nowadays in implementation of the projects. So this explanation I'm giving you, irrespective of technology in the domain, I'm saying this in reference to the IT projects. Now, the third question, important question for most of the people who are from non-IT should understand this. Is this Agile way of approach or Agile methodology or a process, whatever we say, is it something relating only for IT organizations or is it relating to other aspects? See, Agile provides you delivery for the value for the delivery, right? So whatever the delivery of work we are providing, we are giving it to the client, right? Should have a value, should have a quality. That is what generally the aim of Agile. So this can be incorporated anywhere. This is need not be for IT, because whereas we are working on IT projects development, we are talking about Agile. For example, when you are working on operations sector, right, operations domain, operations side for any of the organization, in order to streamline our processes and all, Agile can be incorporated. Now, for example, healthcare. In process of healthcare, Agile can be incorporated. Even in HR, Agile can be incorporated. Even in sales and marketing, Agile can be incorporated. So Agile is a way of approach where you can provide a quality of services to the customer in phase wise within the limited time. That is what the approach of Agile is. So Agile is not something confined only for IT project development. Agile is useful everywhere because there is a connect here, because every process, whatever process we follow for any organization, everything is connecting to IT, right? Without technology, nothing, right? So if, for example, if you want to manage your customers and all, we have an application called CRM, customer relationship management, we are using. You want to integrate all the departments, all the processes, all that, we have an application called ERP, where you are connecting with different departments to streamline your business process, all that stuff, right? So even production, all that can be incorporated. If you want to manage your employees, their payroll and all that, payroll management system we are using. To manage back-end operations of a bank, they are using core banking. So every organization, to manage their operations, business operations, technology has become an integral part of it. So understanding IT, incorporating IT has become inevitable in every organization and every process, even HR, marketing, operations, everywhere. So Agile has a connect to that extent. So Agile is not something relating to IT companies, because IT process is involved even in non-IT also, right? Even you can take any healthcare organization or a retail or a banking, insurance, all that stuff, everywhere IT is involved, because whatever the process they were following, everything is connecting to the information technology, IT, all that. Hence, Agile can be used anywhere, right? This is the introduction about Agile. So why Agile? For what reason Agile being used for? So is it Agile is only used only for IT or not? Yes, it's not. No, it is no, because Agile is not completely to IT organizations, companies. Even Agile can be incorporated even in non-IT also. So this is all about the introduction about Agile. At the same time, comparing this with the traditional models we are using for all time. So whatever the focus we do now is completely into IT project development, not relating to non-IT, subject to terms and conditions. This is what generally we have to. So our focus will be majorly to Agile towards IT. This is what generally our focus is. So this is whatever I have given so far about the introduction about Agile IT now, right? Agile. Now I am going to explain you in terms of the manpower, because if you see the traditional way of approach, because this is what you must be knowing first before I am going for Agile values, principles, or else before I'm going for Scrum, right? So if you'd like to know about all that. So first of all, let us understand the difference between the teams when we are comparing from traditional to Agile. This is what the comparison. One more difference which you need to understand is this. Because if you take a traditional team, let's say we are using waterfall model or V model, whichever the model are we using. When you take a traditional teams into consideration, there are a lot of people will be involved. The major difference between traditional to Agile. Lot of people will be involved in, right? You'll be having a project manager who will be taking care of project planning, budgeting, all that stuff. You have architects. These people will be involved in developing architecture for the project. At the same time, you have development team, technical testing team, user interface designers, documentation team, business analyst, right? So these many people. So if you want to develop an application, or if you are providing solutions for one customer, at least minimum to minimum 20 to 30 people required for you to complete the whole thing. Why? Because project manager is the one who is exclusively focusing more on project planning. Business analyst takes care of business requirements. Architect takes care of architecture of the project. Remaining implementation teams take care of coding, testing, all that, right? This is how generally the traditional teams are. So the team size is very big. At the same time, everybody have their own individual responsibilities. So the focus is only on the responsibility which was given to them. This is what generally traditional teams work. If you are a developer, your responsibilities in whatever the work you do, everything is confined only to your coding part. So you don't take care of other things unless if it is assigned to you, which is compulsory, you do it. Otherwise, end of the day, we don't do it, right? So we are only for that particular work we are belongs to. So we do only that part. We don't do anything else apart. That is what generally traditional teams works. But whereas when you are comparing traditional to Agile, Agile has a different approach. Agile is a self-organizing team. Self-organizing team means whatever the decision, whatever the implementation they are doing, whatever the decisions they are taking, everything is self-organized. Means companies and organizations making everyone accountable on the deeds or the work what they are working on. Because in traditional way, if you are taking project manager is the responsible to complete the project on time, right? So normally project manager is the responsibility only for the whole project. Whereas the same responsibility you don't see that to the developer, because developer is only responsible for the work which was assigned to them, right? So once the coding is completed, then so they don't go for anything else apart.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides agile training mentored by industry experts. the course link of which is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
But whereas when it comes to the agile environment, that is not something like that. Because the major difference is this. Because in agile, the advantage in agile underlying point, because being in this organization for industry for a very long time, as I could see closely, I could see and I'm interacting with a lot of entrepreneurs, right, business owners when I'm transforming the teams, all that. So what I closely observed is agile implementation not only for quality of services providing all that stuff, we should also they want to make each and everybody accountable for the deeds what they are doing. So they are making everybody accountable. So when there is an accountability, there is a responsibility will be there, right? So responsibility and accountability were interconnected. So they want to make each and everyone interconnected and responsible to one and another. That's the reason why this is all a self-organizing team. This is what we call it a self-organizing team, where it is being connected, interconnected, self-organizing, nothing but interconnected. So it is all interconnected. So whatever the work we do, everything was interconnected. Self-organizing teams are interconnected. So each and every person who is working in agile environment is responsible for each and every deed which is happening. Means if you are a developer, you cannot claim yourself that you will be only for development. Even though work allotment when given to you, if there is someone is absent, the other team members has to complete that work within the limited timelines, because agile is completely into short iterations and specific timelines. So there must be a team effort, right? Team management, team coordination, team effectiveness is important. Then only that agile way of approach is successful, otherwise not. That's the reason why there is a difference between that we are working in agile environment and as well as working effectively in agile, because there are two differences. Because most of the people say that we are working for agile environment. People say that we are working on agile environment. But practically speaking, when we talking about this, when we talk about this, 100% are they implementing agile is $1 million question, because there are a lot of parameters takes into consideration. One, they must be having prior experience to implement agile, right? If not, they need to hire someone, or they have to provide some training to someone and they need to start implementing. But when there is an implementation taking place, majorly, especially in agile, based on out of my experience, what I have seen is what they have understood is what we call it as agile. This is how generally few people, of course, I'm not generalizing this point for every team, all that, but most of the teams feel what I understood is what the mod approach is. Right? This is how generally there. This is because of ignorance, not by intention. Again, this is because of ignorance. Whatever they understood, the way how they understood, this is what generally agile. So this is how most of the people feel. That's the reason why 100% agile implementation is not happening for all the projects. The reason why, even though we say agile, 100% they don't go for agile way, because agile way of approach have different values, principles, which everybody must be abide to that. That's the reason underline what they do is that they say agile. Practical, see, these are the practical things, because on a note of understanding about agile, we say so many. But in practical reality, 100% agile are they implementing? No, because agile combination of traditional models will also be incorporated. Because due to the comfort, because it's first of its kind they are implementing. They don't want to make it so confused, right? So they don't want to make it more troublesome when they are implementing. So what is that they do? 100% they don't follow agile. Agile they follow to some extent. When there is a difficulty they have understood so far, they go for traditional model and the traditional approaches will be used. End of the day, what is important? We need to deliver according to the timelines what customer has given, right? So that is the ultimate motto. But they have started with the intention of implementing agile, but 100% is agile implementation. I don't say it is not possible. It is difficult because we have to travel. All the people should adopt. All the people has to understand what is that we are doing, how are we doing, and each and everybody has to understand the value systems, principles, and they have to follow that accordingly for a very long time. As long as the team working on it, everybody has to do it. At the same time, it's all about mindset. Agile is all about mindset, where mindset normally, human reality is that I don't want to give my credit, I don't want to share my credit with others. Right? So this is a human nature. Nothing wrong in it. But whereas in agile it doesn't work out, right? So no individual responsibility or no individual capacity or performances will be taking into account or consideration. End of the day, it is all about team effort and team success. That is what generally agile tells. Agile never tells you that no individual responsibility will be recognized. Agile never encourages this. End of the day, it's all team effort, and whatever the success or a failure will be applicable for every team member. So self-organizing. Self-organizing means people who are working under the team are self-organized people. Whatever the analysis they do, whatever the planning and design, interacting with the client, understanding the requirements, taking up the decisions to work on something, everything will be looking after by these team members itself. That's the reason why the team size of Agile will be very limited. This is hardly, I can say, roughly we will be having not more than 10 members, right? One team, if you say one team consists of 10 people, right? This is how generally the team size is. But whereas in traditional teams, it's not like it may go up to 20, 30 people total, right? One project manager, maybe 2, 3 business analysts, maybe 1 or 2 architects, right? One major one and other next level architects will be there. Database designing, you may be having other people. Development team, couple of developers, couple of testers, couple of user interface designers. Even for documentation, you will be having a separate person. This is how generally the traditional teams will be having. So the team size is also very big. But whereas in Agile, it's not that. Agile is completely confined to the limited people. Means only limited people, not more than 10. So these people has to take care of each and everything. So there will be no other people apart. But here there may be an question by someone from you group from your side. Maybe there may be some question you may arise a question here. Raj, is this possible practically to complete the whole thing with the limited of 10 people, right? Is it practically viable? Because is it possible? Because it's a human intervention. End of the day, people are working, not robots. They cannot work for 24/7, right? So is it practically viable and possible to complete the whole project? Let's say if you can take a core banking project, which is taking an year and a half time, for example, understand, to make it very simple, I'm saying, right? The whole thing. Now, is it practically possible? Can you expect that a team of 10 people will be completing all these, that too with standard and strict timelines? Because the timelines were very clear and very strict because everything is in weeks. Normally, whatever we implement, of course, all this comes in the next. So whatever the implementation in terms of the sprint, everything we do, everything is confined only to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and so on. So the durations were very limited and very tiny in terms of in terms of the size. So do you really feel, is it possible practically? To some extent, yes. To some extent, no. Again, there are two answers. Yes, to some extent possible. To some extent, no. When it is no, yes. When you are going for enterprise level transformation, this is where a concept called a safe, normally we call it as safe transformation, means called a scaled agile. That's a different story. Again, that's a different thing. Where we are transforming the whole organization to the agile environment, where you are working for large and complex projects. So that time, what is that we require is we require multiple agile teams in different locations working for the same project. Whatever the piece of work will be given to you is entirely different than other people. That is how the work distribution will be done. But make sure there must be a proper coordination among all these teams to make that application successful in long run finally. That is a difficult and challenging task. So for that, there are different principles for safe we'll be having. Safe principles are there, Spotify, different things are there. So we go to that. So agile is not something that only limited people will work for a project. To some extent, yes, because for some projects we do the same. For small projects, when there is a limited requirement, all that, yes, we do follow, but not to the full extent. Because when we are going for large scale projects where there is a lot of complexities in, not only the complexity, we don't see only the complexity here, not only the complexity. Apart from the complexity, we have to see how big the project is. So based upon that, whatever the team members we have and all, everything will be varied. There are a lot of team members are involved, lot of teams will be involved, not a single team. Different teams will be there, right? Multiple 3 to 4 teams will be there. There must be a proper coordination with these people in regular intervals. That's what we call it a scrum of scrums. The concept is different. So that is there. So agile. So what I'm trying to say is that agile is a self-organizing team, even though it is limited in terms of the size of the people on its percentage. 100% agile implementation may not be effective for all the projects. Depends on the size of the project, depends on the complexity. Sometimes when you want to transform the enterprise level, means enterprise level transformation means you're transforming the organization to an agile way of approach. So for that, there are a lot of people required for you. Lot of team collaboration is something essentially needed for you to manage. So that is also needed. So different things are involved in this. So agile is not 100% Possible means a single team, I'm saying, right? Not possible for every project. Multiple teams also required. So this is the understanding you need to have. So again, coming back to our this thing. So this is what generally the difference is. If you can see the traditional team members, whoever the members we have and all, everything will be different. At the same time, when we talk about agile and all, agile is something entirely different. It's a self-organizing team where team people will be limited on its percentage. And that too, agile is role specific. There are different roles will be there in agile, where depends on the role, whatever the role will be given to you, will be assigned to you. There will be some responsibilities will be given to you as well. So based upon the roles and responsibilities which was allotted to you, so you have to work accordingly. This is what generally agile tells you. But whereas in traditional way of approach and all, it's different. But whereas in agile, it's a self-organizing thing. Each and everybody is responsible for the deeds what they were working on. So this is the difference you can see from traditional to agile. Now, what is the pillar of implementation of agile? Means agile pillar. This is what we call it as value, or we call it as agile values. What are the different values do we have in agile? We call it as 4 different agile values we have. So what are the different values agile is having? This values also we call it as agile manifesto. In other word for this is called as agile manifesto or values. 4 agile values. So what are the pillars of agile? This is what we were discussing here. What are the 4 different pillars? Because how it is different from the traditional one. Because traditional way of approach known to you guys well, right? So because implementation can be done anytime. So there is no time restriction. Even though you have time restriction, there will be an extension of timelines which might be taken by us upon the request of the customer, wherein we can request the customer and we can get that. And individual capacity, based on the individual capacity people are working. 100% we try our best to make it successful, but there are some cases where due to different reasons projects will be failed. This project failure we need to understand in 2 different ways. One is technical failure, second is financial failure, budget level failure. Technical failure means we haven't understood the requirements properly. Hence, whatever the application or development we have done so far is not according to the expectation of the customer. This is what we call it as technical failure. Next, project failure in terms of the budget. Budget means overrun of budget. There is an amount of budget which is allocated for the project manager. What is project manager is responsible? Project manager is not only responsible for project planning and execution, but whatever the budget was allocated, he has to complete it within that limited budget itself. So there will be of no extension of budget will be given. Sometimes due to improper practices of agile project planning, improper understanding about the technical expertise of the team, or maybe lack of coordination of the management team, managing of the teams, or whatsoever reasons, because some reasons will be in our control, some are not in our control, right? Anything. So sometimes cost overrun means budget was allocated, but when the project was landed up successfully to complete, it's considered as a cost failure project. Project is successful, but whatever are we going to get out of it is nothing. It's a cost failure because whatever we have taken and what we have spent on this has a difference. If the problem is from our end, we have to put it from our side. If the problem means in terms of the changes in any kind of requirements, if this is happened, customer has to pay it, right? So this is all depends on the SLA what we have prepared. This is what we call it as SLA. SLA stands for service level agreement. Means service level agreement should be given by the vendor to the client. Based upon the understandings what we have and all, we have to provide an agreement to the client. So this much duration is there. So within this duration, we are ready to complete the project with all the required deliverables, all that stuff. We have to provide everything. So we have to write on a document and we give. So apart from the financials, what we have discussed, right? So because again, the financials will be different. We go for sometimes some people go for fixed cost, some people go for FTE. Fixed cost means fixed amount of money we are collecting from the customer. Client is paying us fixed amount of money, and we must ensure that within that limited budget we have to complete. This is one thing. But we have to make sure that no changes in requirements should be taken place. If any changes done by the customer, again negotiations will be taken place with mutual consent. This is what generally we do in fixed amount of money. Second is FTE based. We call it as full-time employment. Means for this project to complete, how much manpower we require based on that hourly calculation, hourly billing, right? Per hour, how many dollars are we collecting from the client is what generally happens. These are the 2 different. Once we have discussed all this, so finally what is that we do is that, so finally we have to provide a service level agreement to the customer. So based on the service level agreement, so we have to develop the project. So the structure is entirely different. But whereas when it comes to agile, Of course, whether you are collecting a single amount or you are collecting FTE, whatever it is. But the value system of Agile is something different from the traditional way. The value systems are four. The first part, especially Agile, is depending on first part is that individual interactions over process and tools. Here, the understanding is that it doesn't mean that there is no process or there is no tools. Process we follow, Agile we follow, tools and all, everything we follow. But more than that, we give importance to individuals and interactions. This is what generally we call it as scrum meetings or daily scrum meetings or daily meetings, stand-up meetings or different things. So regular meetings and regular interaction among the people happens in Agile environment. Normally in traditional way of approach, if you see from a context of a BA, when customer or business analyst wants to transform requirements or translate requirements or to communicate with the technical team, how they do that? Normally they prepare some documentation, they give. This is how generally BRD, SRS, all these will functions. If any changes happens in between in terms of the requirements, again those requirements will be changed in the BRD, all that stuff. This is how generally the process we follow in a traditional way. There are difficulties. Sometimes we may fail in delivering the right thing on the document. Sometimes whoever has understood may not be understood in the right manner. So there are possibilities that communication gap in terms of written as well as the verbal might happen. Verbal or written might happen. Communication gap may happen for some reason. So it is always helpful when we have a regular interaction facility with the team members so that the communication gap will come down. At the same time, we can have a closed look on the work, what they are doing, right? So how they are doing, what they are doing, to what extent they have completed so far, what is that they have completed. So we'll be knowing about the progress of work, right? How much work they have completed so far, what is the balance. Everything can be known to us. At the same time, person who is managing this team and all have an advantage to see as well as the listen the practical difficulties what they are facing so that corrections can be done with immediate effect. This is an advantage you can see if you are going for individuals and interactions. So individuals and interactions because of this reason, because in traditional model you don't have a facility, because in traditional model there is no much interaction happens. Of course there is a part of interaction happens in a way of JAD. I hope people who are coming from business analyst, they'll be knowing about this well. There is a concept called JAD. As a part of requirements, elicitation and collaboration, we conduct JAD session, stands for Joint Application and Development Session, which happens in the initial stages of the project, where we invite all the stakeholders under one roof, where discussion will be taken place and final conclusion will be given there. Means what they have discussed, right? What is their expectation? What is that we have understood? All that will be discussed on the platform. That is what generally we call it as JAD workshop, which will be conducted in the initial stages of the project, not occasional, because not in regular intervals. It's not possible in traditional way. So there are possibilities that due to the communication gap, project understanding as well as the understanding of requirements, or sometimes it may leads to failure of the project also happens. So that problem won't be there in Agile. So why? Because there are individuals and interactions will be happening in regular intervals with the team members. So that what are that we are going to do today, right? So what we have done yesterday, what you are going to do today, what are our challenges could be, how to overcome those challenges. All this can be discussed in this interaction itself. So that communication gap will be much lesser. I say much lesser as you are comparing with the traditional model. So this is the first Agile value system which is under Agile. First part is that individuals and interaction is first. Next, second is that working software over comprehensive document. So what is working software? Working software means there is, because most of the people have some misconception over that there is no documentation in Agile. It is not no document, I say it is less documentation, because documentation is essentially needed even though we are working on Agile environment, because not everybody will be experienced in Agile, right? 100%. There are some people who are new to Agile environment. Due to the communication gap or due to lack of documentation, they should not feel any confusion over the work what they are doing. Even though they are technically strong, if you are not for providing that facility, there are possibilities that it may leads to confusion over the understanding level, right? There are possibilities. And that's the reason why I don't say no documentation. Yes, there are documentation which will be prepared in Agile, but not in the form of documentation, something like Word documents, all that. Of course, practically speaking, some people even we prepare documents also. That's what I have told in the beginning. 100% they don't follow Agile. They follow the traditional way of approach because they are used to. Because I don't say that is wrong. So because end of the day, as long as we are very clear on what we are doing, nothing wrong in doing it. I never say it not wrong because their team, their understanding. Right. So there are things like if they are, as long as they are managing it successfully, as long as they are completing it successfully without having any difficulties or the challenges and all, it's fine. So we can't comment on it. It is their team and all that. But here documentation will be of very limited in percentage. In terms of it, normally there is a concept called confluence. You might have heard about it, called confluence. Because whenever you want to work this application, whenever you want to manage projects and all in Agile, there are numerous tools. There are a number of tools, something like Jira, Rally, Windows Azure. Lot of tools are there. Among all that, there is a tool called Jira. Jira. Jira is a kind of tool which is used to manage the project, followed by bug tracking. All that can be done using Jira software. So in Jira, when it comes to the Jira software, it is completely used for project management so that we can write down all the user stories, epics creation can be done. At the same time, there will be a product back. We are managing all the product backlog, all that stuff we were doing. So all these things we were doing in the project itself. So whenever we are working on this, normally, whenever we are working on the on this process, normally there is a tool called Confluence. Confluence is a tool which is used for document collaboration. Document collaboration means where if you want to write down some product requirements, for example, what are the product requirements we want to write? The product requirements to write, there is a option for you in Confluence. Let's say, as I told you, individual interaction through Scrum meetings, daily Scrum meetings we conduct. That's what I have told you. So whenever we are conducting the meetings, we want to update the meeting notes because what we have conducted so far, what are the points we have discussed, where we have concluded, which is accepted, which is rejected, which is deferred, right? That has to be documented. So further, there is an option called meeting notes. So where we can write down all the meeting notes there so that people can see. Because if you as we are connecting this Jira with Confluence, so that whoever are there in the team, because whenever we create the Jira as a project management, we add all the people who are relating to the project, all that. So whenever we are adding the people, whatever the updations and changes are we making, everything can be seen by all these people. So meeting notes can be updated. At the same time, if there is any kind of retrospection we do in terms of the sprint retrospection, all that also can be done. So what I'm trying to say is that documentation is very limited in terms of the percentage, but it is in a form of Confluence. This is what generally widely we are using now, because that gives a value addition to the team when they are working on real environment. Because in the traditional way, we have a facility for documentation to prepare. We have all these BRDs, SRS, all that stuff is there. But whereas in Agile, you don't have the facility. In Agile, we have a facility called Confluence, where there will be less in documentation. So when it comes to this, rather than the documentation, we give more importance to the software, working on software. Means whenever we get the requirements, immediately we start working on the software itself. And if there is, you could ask me one thing then, Raj, if there is any changes to be made, what is that, right? So how we are going to do the changes? Whatever the changes are we going to do, everything will be done accordingly. So based on that, changes will be made, right? So because in between, when there is any change, customer is expecting us to do. So with the team consent of the team members and all, based on the possibility, changes can be done accordingly. So there is no, I don't say there is no planning for project in Agile. Yes, there is a planning, but this planning is short in terms of the percentage. There is no long-term planning. So the planning is confined only to the particular release we plan. So whatever the work we do, whatever the planning we do, everything is confined only to the particular release. Within that particular release, we have to complete. This is what generally the working software is. Means you are directly working on the software rather than you are depending on the documentation. So there is no, because in traditional model, because every time I'm comparing with the traditional so that you'll be understood better. So if you see the documentation, if you see a traditional way of approach, if you are a developer, on what basis development will be taken place? Development will be taken place based on the documentation called BRD SRS, what you have received from the BA, because they are the one who is translating the requirements in a documentation format, and the documentation will be given to you as well. So you are taking up the documentation, you are working on that, and finally you are delivering it, right? This is how generally the process you will be following. So based on the delivery, what business analyst has been given, technical people will go through that, and they were whatever the functionalities they are preparing, whatever the non-functionalities, features, everything is based upon the documentation what BA has given. But whereas in agile environment, you don't have that facility, you don't have that process, because there is no documentation, everything through interaction, because whatever we have interacted, whatever we have decided and accepted, that will be put it on the practice with immediate effect without any second thought. We are implementing it to the next level. This is what generally working software stands for. Means directly we are working on the software, not having any documentation, all that. So whatever the documentation in terms of the confluence we have and all, everything is optional, because that is optional, because not everybody uses confluence, all that, right? So it's an optional thing based upon the team what they have decided. If they want to connect that confluence and all with Jira, so that document collaboration can be done, so that people will understand more effective and better, but which is not compulsory, right? End of the day, it is optional, right? So it is not compulsory as it is, right? So this is the second point, working software. The third is that customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So what is customer collaboration over contract negotiation? Means normal in traditional way of approach, if you see closely, there will be no customer or customer representative will be there in the project, because customer is an outsider, always an external stakeholder, where customer has given the requirements. Whatever the work we do, everything is being confined to the development team. Development team itself is doing all that activities. Customer representative, maybe SMEs and all, everything was supporting us from outside, and whatever the necessarily information they want to provide, they'll be providing us everything from outside. This is how generally that works. But whereas here, especially in Agile, the advantage is that customer collaboration means customer representative will also be a part of the project development. Whatever the work we do, customer will also be a part of it. Who is customer here? Customer is not a business owner, right? Because if you see large MNCs, multinational companies, business owner means it's all runs sometime with consortium, right? So with group of people, there will be board of directors, right? So they'll be taking up decision. There is an organizational structure, right? You have a CEO, you have a CFO, COO, all that. So all these multinational companies, there is an organizational structure we follow. So even though we have an organizational structure, there is no customer who will be coming and sitting us in the project. In spite of it, there is a role called PO normally. In Agile, there are 3 different roles. In that one role called PO. What is PO stands for? PO nothing but product owner. That role will be called as PO, stands for product owner. Normally, this product owner nothing but client representative. How practically happens, I'll tell you. Let's say you are planning to develop a project. All you guys belongs to one project, right? So you are a team of people who are planning to work on Agile environment. You guys have decided. Now you want to implement the project in Agile. Assume that you are experienced, or you may be new to. So few are experienced and few are new. Okay, whatever it is. Now here there will be a role, as I told you, as we call it as product owner role. This product owner will be appointed by the client in some occasions. Normally, in practically, they will choose a product owner and they will recruit a product owner. Some person who is knowing about who knows about the requirements well in advance about the project, everything, that person will be called as product owner. Means what customer wants, what are their expected output, right? So all that will be known to the product owner. So whoever is knowing that, that person will be called as PO. Normally, customer will provide this PO to us. In the first level, normally PO will provide this to us. This is the first level. Whereas in the second level, sometimes customers won't provide us the product owner and all that. If customer is not providing us the PO, what we do is that company itself will recruit one PO on behalf of the client. So what is that this PO do? This product owner is the person who is responsible to provide a quality output of the project as per the expectation of the customer. This is what generally the product owner responsibility majorly lies on, because project owner is responsible completely onto that. Project owner is completely responsible of what they are expecting, because they themselves were treating as customers. So what is that I want is what I am making team to develop. That is what generally customer collaboration means. So when there is a customer collaboration, of course, every process has its pros and cons. This is no way exemption, right? Even this agile is also no way exempted, because practically there are some difficulties, of course. That's a part of process anyway, right? So we have to learn new things and we need to adopt new strategies and we have to move further, right? So it's a continuous process. So there is nothing to say 100% perfection, nothing of that sort, right? So because agile is not something new. Agile has been derived from the old models what we are using successfully at one point in time. But due to the practical difficulties what we have faced over a period of time and all, slowly the practices and the value systems have changed and we have named it as agile. Right? Agile is not born new, right? It's not a newborn instant. Due to the challenges what we have faced based upon the models what we have used and all, slowly we have refined to that extent possible slowly, and based on the challenges and the practical exam difficulties what we have faced.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides agile training mentored by industry experts, the course link of which is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
A new system called agile has been derived from the old ones, right? So that is not 100% entirely new, because this is purely depends on it. So the same way, every process or everything will have its own pros and cons. That's a known thing. So customer collaboration, the advantage for you for customer collaboration is that what is that they are expecting will be known to each and every person who is involving in the project well in advance. That is one advantage you can see in customer collaboration, because there are less percentage of communication gap. You could ask me one thing, can you expect there will be of no communication gap if a customer collaboration will be there? But 100% is not guaranteed, because there is nothing called 100%. Everywhere 99% is what the standard thing is. Nothing as 100%. So there are chances will be very less, that I can say. Practically speaking, chances will be less, because product owner knows everything. So what is their expectation? What is that they want? As long as if they have a clarity, but subject to terms and condition is that product owner should have a clarity first. Because you could ask me, then Raj, if product is so clear about the one what is there, obviously there are some conditions, but if the product owner is confused on something, right? If customer product owner is not to that extent possible, if he doesn't have a clarity on something, obviously there is a communication gap might be arise. So there is a percentage of probability of percentage that thing will be there. But the major advantage for collaboration is that customer will be there with us all the time as long as we are working on the project. So what are their expectations, demands, everything will be known to the team members well in advance. At the same time, what we are doing will be closely watched and observed by the product owner, because in a way of conducting regular meetings, review meetings, all that, customer will be knowing about what is that we have done, how far we have completed, what is that not yet completed so far. Because any practical difficulties when people are working on, even though we do our own practice prior, but end of the day, there are some practical possibilities and complexities of implementation might be taken place in between, which is not something guaranteed. Sometimes it happens, right? Practical difficulties team might be facing for different reasons, which because 100% that cannot be identified. So for negotiation purpose also, it is you have an advantage, because customer will be there with you all the time. There are possibilities that negotiations can be taken place with the customer. So whatever we want to make some changes out of it can be done accordingly. So this is another advantage where you can see in terms of the customer collaboration here. So customer is collaborating with you all the time in a way of the role called product owner. But remember one thing, this is a role of product owner you see only in Scrum. If you follow practice of Scrum, then only you see this. But whereas if you go for Kanban or something like that sort, you don't see any this product owner. Even the team members who are responsible to complete the task, they themselves have to take care of all the requirements and all directly from the client. So there is no middleman called product owner. If you call Privo as a middleman, there is no product owner in Kanban. The same Agile, remember, the same Agile value in Agile, if you follow Scrum, the approach will be different. If you follow Kanban, the approach will be different. If you're following Kanban and all that, so you'll be having more of product owner, all that. If you follow a practice of Kanban, again, you don't see any product owner, something that with whatever the development team, normally those people we call it as development team, right? So even in Kanban, there is a team development team we call. So that team is responsible for all the works, right? So even requirement gathering, everything will be looking after by the team itself, not by anyone as product owner as separate. But this is possible only in traditional Scrum, all that stuff. But the value system, customer collaboration, yes, means customer is directly interacting either way, whatever the way, customer is directly interacting, and whatever the requirements they want us to develop can be done accordingly. This is how generally the third point called customer collaboration means customer directly involving in the work what we are doing, so that whatever the necessary output they are expecting everything every day, because it's a day-to-day activity, because agile is something confined to limited ones. If you have taken up some sprint to be completed, it has to be completed in 2 weeks time, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and 4 weeks, and so on. Within weeks it has to be completed. Again in weeks it is converting into days, backward you can see, right? Weeks, week to days, days to hours. This is how generally the calculation is. So each and every 1 hour, each and every hour is important, each and every working day is important. Because normally whenever we take the calculation, we take working days, not the weekday, not the holidays. Even any national holiday, something that will be taken out. That we don't consider that. If it is, for example, if it is week, we take 5 days into consideration, no Saturday, Sunday. Even in this 5 days, there is a national holiday or something like public holiday, we have to take it out. We have to consider only 4 days. So when it comes to the planning, right? When we are coming, when we see like how much manpower we have, how much time we have to complete, right? So if you are calculating all that stuff, this is how generally we do. So customer collaboration is what we do here, right? So this is third point. Next, responded to change over following plan means there is no proper planning. I don't say proper planning, not in other sense. There is no plan, perfect plan for this. If there is a change which is inevitable, which is being requested by the customer, how to make this change happens? How is it possible to implement the change is what generally the perception of the team will be having. So responding to change means whatever the changes customer is expecting, we have a facility that we'll do as what we can. But this is with the consent of team. Normally we do. It is not that as I told you that there is a possibility of changing. Doesn't mean that we do the changes with immediate effect. It is not practically viable to do, because that's a practical difficulty. Because whatever the sprint we have created for the sprint, there is a scope will be defined for that particular sprint. So that scope should not be deviated. If scope has deviated, obviously the total plan of sprint focus will be deviated by the team members. So it will be impacted on the particular sprint, what we have initiated and what we have planned so far. Everything will get deviated because of this. So end of the day, that is the team responsibility. Team has to decide. Team members have to decide whether is there any deviation can be accepted here or not. So it doesn't mean that responding to change is accepted, doesn't mean that we are accepting with immediate effect. Again, subject to terms and conditions that it has to be accepted by the team members. And again, negotiations will be taken place with interactions will be taken place with the product owner. With the proper consent, whatever we have and all, finally implementation will be taken place further. So otherwise, there is no changes, nothing will be done with immediate effect. So that's not practically possible, and we don't do that also. So these are the 4 different agile values which normally we use in agile. So one is individuals and interactions is what we do first, because we'll be focusing more on individuals and interactions. Means day-to-day interactions will be there in agile. This is what one value, first point. Second, working software. We are directly working on the software as we are not following any kind of documentation as separate, because interactions we have made. So based on that, we start understanding and start working on it. That's how generally it happens. Third is customer collaboration. Customer is collaborating with us all the time. So what are their expectations? Everything will be known to us so that we can do it. No problem. Next, responding to change. Whatever the changes you want to do, responses based upon the responses and all that, changes can be done accordingly. So these are the 4 major values. This is also called as Agile Manifesto. So this is basically Agile is being focused more on. If someone is asking you how different from traditional to agile is this is the difference you see from traditional to agile. On a high level note, in terms of the Agile Manifesto is concerned. These are all comes under the Agile Values, or we can call it as Agile Manifesto also. So this is all about Agile introduction, how it is different from the traditional to agile itself. At the same time, what are the different values as well as the manifesto principles which we follow in Agile. If you see Agile, Agile is a umbrella, right? If you can take Agile as an umbrella, right? So if you see Agile as a way of approach or umbrella or a methodology, whatever it is, there are different frameworks, processes will be there under Agile. One is Scrum. Scrum is a framework, remember, right? Scrum comes under framework. Scrum is a framework. Next, XP we have. XP stands for Extreme Programming. Extreme Programming. Next, we have one more called Kanban, right? So Kanban is a model, is a development model. Especially this is a Japanese model, Kanban, which is something close to lean process, all that stuff. This is one thing, Kanban. Next, we have another process called RUP, stands for Rational Unified Process. This is being powered by Rational Software Corporation. Earlier, it was there. Rational Unified Process, right? And next, we have other process earlier. Normally, this Agile and all everything is derived from this. DSDM stands for Dynamic Software Development Methodology. Right, so these are the different frameworks and processes which are there under Agile. Somebody follows Scrum, somebody follow XP, somebody follow Kanban, RUP, DSDM. So normally not all these major ones are these three. I can say simply because I don't want to make you confused by putting all the information here. Major things is Scrum, XP, Kanban. These are the three major things which will be part of under Agile. Some people follow exclusive Scrum, some people follow exclusive XP, some people follow Kanban. Sometimes Scrum with Kanban combination, right? That is what we call it as Scrumban, SCRUMBAN, Scrumban. Scrumban is, I'll give you an example to you. For example, you are providing a solution for a manufacturing unit, automobile sector. Normally, automobile people uses a process called lean, LEAN, lean process. In the beginning, in the first session, I think I might have given this point to you. If I remember, I'm not sure. Lean process. Lean process is the one which is being used to minimize the production loss in terms of the time, right? So they want to maximize the effort, quality, delivery, all that within the limited timeline. They want to make utilization of the time, quality of time will be used. Wastage of components, wastage of time, everything can be minimized using this lean process. In that lean process, there is a process called Kanban, which they will be using here. Customer, right? Now, whenever we are following a practice of Scrumban, what we do when we are implementing Scrum, we follow a practice of Scrum and Kanban also. Sometimes Scrum with Kanban, sometimes Scrum, sometimes only XB, right? Sometimes Scrum with traditional model, something like as I told you in the beginning, right? We follow Agile. Underline, normally we say that we follow Agile, but whatever the practice of development we do, everything we follow the traditional way. 100% Agile won't be used. Traditional way of approaches will be the major part. 60% traditional, 40% Agile. I don't say wrong, right? So depends on the team, depends on the experience what they have. So depends on the comfort, this will be varied. So whatever the frameworks, processes and all, everything, part of Agile. Somebody follows Scrum, somebody follow XP, Kanban. It's entirely depends on their experience, what they have earlier. At the same time, what they believe. For some people follow, think that Scrum is the right thing, right? Some people feel that XP is the right one. So end of the day, that is their discretion, team and management discretion with that, whether which process they are following and all everything will be decided by the team itself. They have to take the decision on it, not by the anyone else apart, right? So they are the one who is taking the decision on that. Clear to you? Is it clear or not? Normally, when it comes to the product owner role, customer will be given you the person, right? The customer will appoint a product owner. For example, I am the one, right? So customer will give, he's a product owner. He'll be taking care of all the product requirements and all everything from here onwards. He'll be organizing all that stuff, right? This is one thing. For some projects, this is how it happens. Customer will give you the product owner. Point number one. In some cases, there is no product owner given by the client. So whenever the team management, whenever the management has decided Agile and all that, so they recruit product owner as separate. This product owner is the one who is working on behalf of the client. That's how it happens. That one or this. And whatever the principles I am explaining you here, whatever the 12 principles and all everything, are behind under the Agile Manifesto, the same points, whatever the points we were discussing on the value system, the same thing will be repeated here. The first point under Agile principles is that we give high priority to the customer satisfaction. So customer will be satisfied when we are delivering it on time, followed by this, whatever that they are expecting from us. So whenever we are delivering, customer will be happy. So the major priority, especially in Agile, is to provide the value added services to the customer within the time limits which was finalized so far, right? This is what generally the first priority is. Second point is that changes can be done at any point in time. Whatever the changes we want to make in the process of application development, even in late development, normally in the traditional way of approach, if you see, changes, whatever required us to do in between the project, in middle of the project, is difficult. I don't say it is not possible, it is difficult due to the, again, you need to go for analysis, right? So someone has to do the analysis part, someone should do the planning and design part, after that someone has to do the coding part. So a lot of people are involved, right? So different people are involved for different activities. So coordinating them, again, reworking on that takes a lot of time and energy, manpower. Automatically, when manpower has increased, automatically operational cost will also get increased. At the same time, we have to make sure there should not be any kind of technical complexity. But whereas when it comes to the agile environment, the approach of agile development will be in such a way where whatever the work we are doing, everything is something relating to the user story. Because this is how generally user stories comes into picture. What is user story? I will tell you now. Sometime we'll start. I'll explain about it. So we'll write it on a shorter format. In simple terms, I can say whatever the requirements we have. Normally, in the traditional way of approach, we write documents, something like BRD, SRS, all that, and whatever the functional, non-functional requirements, everything will be written on the document itself. But whereas when it comes to the agile environments is concerned, whatever the requirements we were writing, everything will be written in a shorter format. That is what we call it as user stories transfer. So that user story has independent on its nature. So whenever, whatever the changes to be made into the existing one can be done accordingly. So that is the second point. The advantage in Agile is changes can be made at any time, any point in time, but there is a difference. Again, if you remember yesterday, I have told you, whereas in Scrum, there is some difficulty, means there are some challenges, whereas when you follow Kanban practices and all, that can be done. But still 100%, as I said, like 100%, there is no this thing. So there is, but still it can be manageable, right? So that is the second point. Third is that whatever the delivery of the work we do, normally it will be on the week's time, usually in agile environment. If you see the agile as in high level, especially in reference to the traditional model when we are comparing first, at least to complete project, it will be taken not less than 8 months to 1 year, right? So this is the minimum thing for any project to start and to complete it. But whereas when it comes to the agile environment, as I stated earlier, this is all focused more on the release, because release planning is what will be done prior. So based on the release planning, implementation will be taken place. So whatever is that we have started or whatever the release we have initiated so far, based on that implementation will be taken place. So when we talk about release is not something full for the whole project, right? So we are not taking the whole project into an account. Whatever is required for the customer is what will be taken initially. So that piece of work will be done. So if you are dividing that into consideration, assume that the release planning we are making in 3 months of time. This 3 months can be divided into weeks, right? For example, if it is 3 months, 4 into 3, and on an average 12 weeks, right? Again, these weeks will be converted into days into hours. So whatever the delivery of work we do, especially in reference to the agile itself is concerned, everything in short iterations. When we talk about short iterations and all, it will be based on the weeks. Normally, weeks are the one we consider. Weeks are the point we consider into, we'll take into consideration. Weeks are the one we'll be taking into an account. This is the third point under agile. The fourth point is that even business people, means business cross-functional teams. In simple word, I can say fourth point is that cross-functional teams, because there will be a difference between the business functional people as well as the technical people, because functional people knows about the functionalities of the existing process, all that stuff. Maybe a business analyst is one of the person who knows about the functionality. Not only that, even business users, all that people, right? At the same time, technical people means development team, testing team, all that. Normally, both all these people, usually these two people were two different things, right? Functional people were externally supporting us, except BA. Remaining other people will be within the project and they work accordingly. This is how usually the structure follow everywhere. But whereas when it comes to the agile itself is concerned, even business people, development people, all these people works under the same platform. This is what we call it as cross-functional teams. Everybody works for the same cause. Everybody's target is to complete whatever is being identified and finalized. Right? So everybody works towards that. Hence, there is nothing as that I'm only confined to this, because especially in agile, the major difference you see from traditional to agile is that you need to have a multitasking ability that is essentially needed. Of course, even though you are a developer, you may be expert in development, or as a part of that, you may be good at coding, all that stuff. So apart from that, what else is required for us is to know about the other aspects as well. Means you must be good enough to participate in a group, I'm saying, right? Not as an individual. In a group, you may be required to work as in into analysis. Maybe you may be required to participate in planning and design, not only into implementation, testing. If there is a requirement, so we have to do those points as well. So that is one thing. So multitasking is something essentially needed in agile, because small iterations we are taking, that to time frame, it's completely based on the time frame, so that if someone is absent on behalf of someone has to take that responsibility. This is what generally the fourth point is. The fifth point is that whatever the projects we were developing, everything is based upon the motivation of the individuals, all that. So it's all a group of activity we do. Everything is depending on the trust as well as the motivation among group, which is essentially needed, especially happens in agile as well. Next, the sixth point is about sustainable development. Whereas whatever the work we do, everything is in sustainable mode. Means you don't see any kind of jumps and all everything, which are huge in percentage, right? So because whatever the changes and all everything, we were identifying those changes and we are doing it parallelly. Depends on the possibility whether are we keeping it in the present one or we are transferring it to the next one, is what we're doing anyway, as I mentioned earlier. So there is a possibility of sustainable development, especially in agile, is possible when we are comparing with the traditional model, because if there is any volatility in requirements taken place, that is really difficult and challenging task here, right? So whereas that part won't be there in agile, because we have an assurance that changes can be made at any stage. So structure of agile will be something of that sort, right? So this is the sixth point. At the same time, whatever the work we do, the seventh point, when it comes to the seventh point, whatever the work we see, everything is based upon the progress of the work, right? Measuring the progress of the work is what measuring of the work is. Means whatever is promised, what we have assigned, what we have completed is what we see. This is what generally happens in agile. At the same time, eighth point is about face-to-face conversation. If you can see, the first point I have mentioned you, individuals and interactions, where there will be a lot of interactions, because especially in agile, uh, if you are working on agile, especially in agile teams, all that stuff, whatever the interactions we had and all everything is the major aspect. Means face-to-face interaction among the team members is what normally we do. Normally this kind of nature you don't see in other ways. In the traditional model, if I'm communicating, for example, if I'm being a business analyst, assume that, right? So I'm the one who is translating my requirements into the technical format or a business related format. I'm preparing documentation. My documentation speaks, not me, all the time. IL speaks when it is required, but most of the times my documentation speaks on behalf of me. What is that I want to present, everything will be there in the documentation. But there are some difficulties, because sometimes people may find difficulty to understand what I have prepared. It may be due to because of my mistake, or sometimes maybe they may be in a position to may not be in a position to understand those properly. So these kind of problems might be arised in long run, because the projects will be of uh, very large in size, right? It will not be there for 2 3 months. All that stuff will be taken at least year and a half to complete. So it is always helpful, especially in terms of the short term deliveries. It is always beneficial to have a face to face conversation among the team members, which is essentially needed. But because we don't have that much time even to prepare any documentation, because for example, if I am the one who has understood the requirements, translating into document and again providing it to you takes a lot of time for us. So that much of facility you don't see in agile. So that's the reason why it is always we are depending more on face-to-face conversation. That will happen in a format of normally we do like scrum meetings and all. We call it as scrum meetings. Usually Scrum meetings will be conducted day to day. Every day for about 10 minutes we sit. We discuss about, the team members will discuss about what is that we are doing, right? How we are doing. So what are our tasks to be completed for today, right? So what could be the challenges, how to overcome that. So everything will be discussed on day-to-day basis. So there is less chances of the complexity or less chances of the confusion over the team members due to this addressing mode, right? Addressing mode of conversation. Next, continuous attention towards technical excellence is also there. That is one thing. At the same time, art of maximizing the work which is not done. So for that, generally there are some report generations and all, everything we do. Usually Scrum Masters are the people who normally prepare these velocity charts, all that. So using those velocity charts, they come to know what is that promised and what is that we have completed. So how much more work is there for us to complete. So for that, what is that decision to be taken based upon the reality what we have understood. All that will be done by the team Scrum Masters. Usually they prepare different charts. That's a different thing. Next, architectures, requirements and all, everything will be done by the team itself, because you don't see any exclusive architects. Because if you see, for any application development, especially in reference to the traditional, I'm comparing, you might have heard about a role called solution architect. Solution architect means the person who develop architecture for the project, who creates a roadmap to develop the project from the technical point of view. Unless until if there is no technology which is integrated, because when you are developing an application normally, if you see from a high level mode, will be of 3 different layers normally. First layer, we explain you on the word document, we understood better. Normally, if you take any project will be of 3 layers, right? 3 layers. The first layer we call it as presentation layer. First thing we call it as presentation layer. Second, we call it as business or logic layer. Third will be called as data layer. There is a constant connectivity between among these 3 is important. Presentation layer means what you see on the screen. Business and logic layer means whatever the code we write, everything comes under business and logic. For example, 1 plus 2 you have given. Whenever you press the enter button, you are getting a reply called 3. Being a user, are you doing any addition here? No. There is a program which was written by the developer in back of it for addition, not for 1 plus 2, right? It may be 1 plus 2 or it may be 500 plus 300. So a developer has written a program for addition. So based on the program, what they have written and all, you can see the output there, right? That is what generally. So the logic layer. So where logic will be implemented here accordingly. This is the second thing. The third is data layer, means whatever the data we are uploading, right? We are presenting through presentation layer, everything will be stored on the data layer itself. Of course, for the database designing, everything has to be done by the database designers, all that. Followed by this, if you are extracting the data for report generations and all, everything. So there is a connect among these presentation, business logic layer, data layer, all that stuff. So which is something technically connecting with this. This is where generally a solution architects are the people normally come from the technical background, because architects are the people, we consider them as technical people, not the functional ones, because functional ones never become solution architects, because solution architecture is completely a technical thing. Whoever is having more than 10-15 years of experience in developing technical applications for different clients, whoever is having vast knowledge about the technology transformation, programming, coding part, all that stuff. So those people will become architects normally. Solution architects is highly recognizable and important role for any organization, especially for project development. It is one of it. I don't say that remaining other roles are not important, but this is one of the important role. This is what generally the layers and all about. So there will be architects normally. Traditional model, you can see the architects, all that stuff. But whereas in the application development in reference to Agile, whatever the architectures we prepare, everything will be done by the self-organizing team. Self-organizing team need not be a developer. Even architect can also be a part of self-organizing team, right? So you don't see any person as separate. Even an architect, whoever are there as separate, right? So that architect may also be a part of self-organizing team. Sometimes Otherwise, these people are well experienced in terms of the technology, all that stuff. These people can also become architects. So they can develop architecture as what they understood so far, all that. So this is another point here. At the same time, whatever the requirements, because behavioral attitude, behavioral tendencies, understanding about the team efforts, teamworks, in regular intervals, and all everything is also needed. So these are the major 12 principles which are there behind Agile Manifesto. So whatever the points we have discussed in the Agile Manifesto, the same thing will be reflected under the principles. Now we were shifting our focus from Agile to the next level. So the next level is this. You can see this umbrella, whatever the umbrella you can see in an umbrella format, you can see that. Because as I mentioned you, Agile is a process or a way of approach. There are different frameworks and processes will be there under Agile. There are some processes, something like Scrum, Kanban, Lean, DSTM, at the same time RUP, Rational Unified Process, all that, right? So different.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides agile training mentored by industry experts, the course link of which is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
Frameworks and processes will be there in Agile. Depends on the expertise what the team is having, depends on the requirements and the need, whatever the model we were choosing and all everything will be varied. Normally, when we talk about team, one team and multiple teams, you can see in this umbrella, you can see for one team or for multiple teams. So the difference is very simple. One team means the combination of product owner or developer tester, all these put together somewhere around 10 people. This is all called one team. Sometimes one team is sufficient for you to complete the project. So when the project size is very small and complexity is also small, usually one team is sufficient. But it will not happen in all the cases because all the cases are not something the same. Because the case will be different from one another. It will not be the same. So sometimes you require multiple teams to work on the project, especially in large scale enterprise transformation level, where whenever you are transforming the whole organization to the enterprise level format, where you have to deal with multiple things. The application will also be very large in size, complex in percentage. So you require multiple teams involvement. At the same time, you need to have a proper coordination among those teams. So this is what generally a concept called scaled agile framework we call. So more than agile, I can say in simple terms, I can say more than agile, we have other thing. Next level is called SAFe. SAFe, SAFe, SAFe. SAFe stands for Scaled Agile Framework. This what Scaled Agile Framework means. Agile square, I can say, right? Agile into agile. So this is what generally Scaled Agile is. Means for large scale transformations, when you have multiple teams, when there is a coordination is required, so Scaled Agile Framework and all everything used. So you are following Scaled Agile Framework. Again, there are different models for that, Spotify, all that stuff. That's a different story. So different frameworks Agile is having. So whatever the process and frameworks people follow, they have to be abide with the value system what Agile is having, followed by the principles which was identified and defined so far. Everybody has to follow the same. So there is no deviation here. But the way of approach when we are dealing the project and all depends on the kind of framework we have, the process framework or the process we have identified or we have chosen. At the same time, the kind of experience what we are having or what we carry, right? Depends on it. It will not be remain same for everyone. It depends on the kind of expertise what we have, depends on the kind of team what we have and all everything. These things will be varied here. So, but here is a question, because yesterday also I have pointed this point, because most of the people will have a doubt here. Raj, we heard more about Scrum than any other else apart. If you have an idea earlier of Agile, I'm saying this. Right? Somebody, whoever is having a basic knowledge about Agile, can ask me a question that Raj, we heard more about Scrum than other things, other Kanban, XP. We heard very less about this than Scrum. What could be the reason? Right? This may be a question might be arise to the people who are already known about Agile earlier, the basic one, I'm saying. The answer is very simple. Agile, in terms of the implementation of the project, especially for the people who are new to Agile, especially people who are new from traditionally, you are experienced, traditional model you are used, you worked as a developer, tester, and something of that sort earlier. Now, team has initiated, now organization has decided to implement a project in agile environment. So the team is very new, right? So even though you may be having experienced people, maybe you can count it on fingertips. Or else either you need to hire people from outside or you have to train your people from other external sources. You have to do either way. But remaining other people who are working on the agile and all everything will be normally those people will be blank, right? So those people doesn't have any experience on that. So for these people, Scrum is a framework which is highly useful to them rather than XP Kanban, because XP Kanban, even though it has its own popularity, in terms of the complexity, in terms of the addressing system, all that has some difficulties. Difficulty, I don't say it is not technically strong. It has its own difficulties. Something like development approaches will be there. If you take XP, something like extreme programming, all that. So there is an approach called pair programming, test-driven development. So different approaches normally we follow. At the same time, Kanban is a model, something development friendly, developer friendly, where tasks, boards, everything will be designed. At the same time, whatever the work with everything has to be taken care of by the team itself. So there is no specific roles earlier apart. But whereas in Scrum, it's not like because in Scrum, why are we going for Scrum? Because Scrum is friendly as well as easy to people to understand as well as adopt. That's the reason why more prominence is there for Scrum. At the same time, success rate and as well as the usability is also more for Scrum. That's the reason why we have more about Scrum rather than remaining things. So our focus normally will be on Scrum for the throughout the training. Right? So this is what one point I would like to mention. Now, especially in reference to the Scrum, when you talk about Scrum, then as I told you, if you remember, when I explained about the comparison between the traditional to agile teams, as I mentioned you, it's a self-organizing team. At the same time, team size will be limited, isn't it? Right? That's what I have told you. That's the reason why, first of all, let us understand what are the different roles to be there in Agile. The first thing what you need to know, because we have understood about Agile, for what reason Agile is, what are the value systems, values, manifesto principles, everything we have discussed. At the same time, what are the different frameworks and processes are there under Agile, we have discussed. Now we need to discuss about Scrum. Why Scrum? For what reason? All that. So that also I mentioned you. But in reference to the Scrum, there are roles are there, because if you see traditional model, you can see like project manager, business analyst, architects, developers, testers, all these people will be there. But whereas when it comes to the Agile, it is a different thing. It's the process will be a different, completely different. In Scrum, normally there are 3 different roles. Yeah. So this is the diagram. Yeah. So this is it. Right. So this, especially in Agile, the roles will be 3. Remember, these roles you can see in Scrum, whereas in Kanban, XP and all, this kind of thing won't be there. Because the complete team, only team will be there. Team will look after each and everything. So that is one kind of, I don't say drawback. This is that is that nature of the Scrum XP will be that sort, right? So and nothing more there. But this is something easy for team who are newly transforming to Agile. It is more helpful to them because whatever the roles, whatever the Agile we have and all everything, because people were adjusted to the roles, right? So earlier designation, because you have a project manager who will be looking after that. There will be an architect who is taking care of the solution architecture, right? So all that we have seen, because people who are from the traditional model were experienced with that. Now, when it comes to the Agile itself is concerned, Agile is all role specific, as I mentioned you. So this is more connecting. It is because people can transform themselves easily here. So that's the reason why people will be more about Agile roles here. Normally in Agile, in reference to the Scrum itself is concerned, it is all role specific, where roles will be divided for 3 different things. The first role we call it as product owner. You can see here on the screen. Second will be called as Scrum team, followed by Scrum master. You can see 3 different roles in Agile. One is product owner, second Scrum team, followed by Scrum master. 3 different roles. Now, what a product owner and who is product owner is, right? So this is the first and foremost question we need to understand. Product owner usually is a role will be played by an individual who maximum focuses on the what the customer expects, means in what way we have to provide value added services to the customer, is what generally the perception for any product owner will be. Product owner never thinks from the team perspective. There is a clear cut difference between the role of a product owner and a scrum master in a high level note. Product owner always thinks from the customer perspective. Scrum master always thinks from the team perspective, but he must make sure what is that product owner want, he has to meet finally. But at the same time, he has to take care of the welfare of the team also, Scrum master. So that is the fundamental difference. Apart from the remaining aspects, the fundamental difference is that normally product owner is the person. Yesterday also we have discussed the same point. Let me repeat the same. Product owner, nothing but client representative. First point. This role will be recruited by the customer. Usually, if you are developing a project, so for example, from XYZ organization, we are developing an application. Product owner will be their person, their individual. Whoever they are sending, it is immaterial to us. But product owner will be there. The fundamental thing is that product owner, if he is a product owner, he or she is a product owner, they must be having a clear understanding about that, what is they want. What they want should have a clarity for them, for sure. For whatsoever reason, they should have a clarity. If they are missing in clarity, then gone. Everything will go away. So a product owner should have a clear understanding about what is that they want, what is that they are expecting from the people. So that clarity should be there for a product owner. That's the reason why most of these POs and all everything comes from the customer side. Point number one. If not, if nobody is sending, so we have to recruit a product owner. Now here we need to understand one more point. There is a role called BA in traditional way of approaches. You can see. So the role of a business analyst you can see. So business analyst is the person who will be taken care of by the business requirements, all that. Normally earlier you used to have in the beginning days. When I started, of course, in the year of 2001, sometime even I remember. Usually we used to have two different roles in application development. When we work on project, we used to have two type of analysts earlier. Now it was changed anyway. The transformation has been taken place. Earlier we used to have two different roles. So one is business analyst, second is systems analyst. We used to have two different roles. Business analyst means completely focusing on the business perspective, business requirements, all that. Systems analyst completely focusing on the technicality. Means if you want to develop, for example, there was a point of sale system. What is point of sale system? Point of sale system is a billing system. So billing system we are using normally in retail store. Whenever we buy the products, against to the billing, all that stuff, whatever the billing happens, that is what we call it as POS, point of sale system. Now, a customer wants to develop a point of sale system. Because assume that there is an existing POS. Customer has some difficulties in using this POS system because the application was very old. They were using for a very long time. The present situation, the volume of business has increased, lot of features were involved, lot of services of the business services have increased. So that existing application is not performing well. So they want to have some solution to be taken into account, right? So they want someone has to provide solution for that. Usually all these activities will be done by the BA, whatever the business related thing, functional related, whatever the solution they were understanding. So by understanding the existing process, followed by proposed future, all that by keeping all these in mind, business analyst will give you the business solution. Now, technical solution. Technical solution means how you are transforming from business to technology is what we call it as technical solutions transfer. Understood, right? Business solution is different, technical solution. Let me explain you that first so that you will be having a clear understanding. What is business solution? What is a technical solution? Let's say there is a POS application. Customer is using for a very long time. Now, due to the configuration is very low because assume that they are using since last 10 years, the configuration was very less at that percentage of time because that time the volume of the customers were also very limited to them. Now the customer base has increased. The amount of time for billing should be very faster, but it is not happening due to the configuration issue because the configuration is very slow because old configuration. Second, they want to generate reports online. They want to see because they have multiple stores in different locations. They want to see everything online, but they couldn't do it. That is second point. Third, if there is any problem in terms of the technicality, because end of the day, point of sale system is an application and a server system, right? So it's a hardware device. If there is any problem, someone has to come and troubleshoot it, repair it. Till the time that system will get halted for some time, right? So pressure will be more in the other roles. This is how generally practically the customer is facing the problem. Now customer wants a solution to be provided first. So for this, please address, right? So these are three problems. One is configuration is very slow. You want someone has to upgrade the configuration is the one thing. Second, they want to generate reports online. This is the second problem. Third problem is that if there is any kind of repair come across, someone has to troubleshoot. For that, it is taking a lot of time. So more pressure will be on the other rows. So this is the problem they are facing. Now, a business analyst, what a BA do? A business analyst is the person try to understand this. Assume that developing a cloud-based POI system is what the solution a business analyst has been identified. What is cloud-based application? Cloud-based application means whatever the POS application we have will be developed on the cloud environment. Something like either by using like Windows Azure or something. There are different cloud service providers nowadays we got. So they identified a cloud service provider and they want to develop an application on cloud. Because of the cloud system, the advantage is that they don't require any kind of infrastructure. Even a small retailer or a mid-level retailers can use it. What is that they require is a laptop or a desktop with a proper internet connection. So they have to make sure that, right? They need to have a proper, decent, fast internet connection is required so that they don't require to maintain any data, nothing. Everything will be uploaded on cloud. Whatever the reports, everything will be uploaded in the cloud itself, will be generated because there are templates available there. If you give the figures, numbers and all, automatically reports will be generated. Assume that if it's a business owner wants to see all that, so they can see anywhere online. At the same time, there is nothing for repairing anything. Right? So there is no repair, nothing. Because it's a cloud application, management will be taken care of by them. And that too, it's cost effective. It will not be much coster for you. Right? So whatever the services customer is using, for that they have to pay per use kind of stuff. Now, the developing cloud-based point of sale system, whatever business analyst identified is what we call it as business solution. Okay. Now, to develop that, how to develop this, what technology is required, so configuration related things. Even though it's a cloud, we need to identify, right? So these things normally takes care of the systems analyst. I'm just giving an example. This is how earlier was in the beginning days. But now slowly the transformation has taken place nowadays. Now we were calling this as, nowadays you can see in job profiles, we can call it as business systems analyst. This is how the transformation has been taken place in most of the profiles. I'm saying somewhere other way you can say a business analyst also, but normally, because the point is that earlier you don't require any technology because technical expertise and all everything was not much required, because when we started our careers in the year of 2001, 2, 3, you don't require much technology required because there are technical people who will be looking after all that. But now the situation was not that. So you must be, I don't say that you must be expertise in coding, development, all that, but the situation has changed in such a way. Person who is working as a business analyst should have a knowledge about the technology, knowing about the technology, transformation of the technology, how it is changing. So that sort of understanding is required. So that is how generally the transformation. So this is what generally the role of a BA in short, right? This is what BA. Now, most of the people will have a confusion here. Raj, if I am a business analyst working for about 5 years or 10 years in an application development, wherein I am experienced in traditional model. But now in Agile, what is that my role will be, right? So what role will I be playing? Fundamentally, one thing, if you talk about Agile environment or Agile, you don't see any role as project manager or a BA. No role as BA project manager, nothing. So whoever is working under Agile environment must be there, especially in reference to Scrum. Again, I'm repeating. You will be under these three roles. Either you will be a product owner, you will be a Scrum team, or else you will be under Scrum master. Most of the times, if you are a business analyst, most of the times chances will be that you will be acted as a product owner. Why? Because if you see the responsibilities of a product owner comparing to BA, it is all more of similarity, right? You can see the similarity between those two things. That's the reason who are working under business analysts, chances are more that they become product owner. Why? Because product owner is a client representative. Business analyst is also a client representative. Hence, product owner is a role. But nowadays, even we also see practically they are taking even business analyst also, because business analyst project managers also people were taking for different reasons, because they require some additional manpower support. That is the reason they are taking. But if you are a BA, when you transform your career to agile, normally you will become a product owner, because the roles and responsibilities for something similar. Hence, product owner is the role. So this is one thing I must tell you, because I could see some persons who are relating to BA. The reason why this is helpful to them, I hope, right? So this is point number one. Next, what product owner do, right? So as is stated and earlier mentioned, product owner is the person who will be focusing more on about what is that customer wants and what customer requires. This is what generally the product owner mentality will be. So always things from the customer perspective, right? What product, what customer wants, what customer demands. This is what generally. So a product owner is the person who has to define the goal and vision of the product. This is the first responsibility. What is goal and vision? Goal and vision means what finally we want to achieve. Let us take our point of sales system. Assume that. Let because I have taken example of POS, right? Let me take the same example here. We want to develop a point of sale system, right? This is what the customer requires. Either it could be a cloud based or a traditional, whatever it is, but they want a point of sale system to be developed. So what should be the reason? See, developing a POS system is not an individual entity in the organization, because it's a part of the business. You take a retail store, point of sale system is a part of the retail store operations. Directly or indirectly, this POS system is supporting the business, right? So if someone is investing money to you to develop a point of sale system for their billing, all that, there must be some goal and vision. Without having a goal and vision, nobody is investing money, right? So a business owner is investing money for what reason? For example, I am a business owner, I am coming to you guys and I'm asking you to develop a point of sale system. I'm ready to spend some amount of time on that, right? So I want to pay you this much of money. So why am I paying? Because directly or indirectly, this POS application is benefiting my business. It's benefiting my business. In what way it is benefiting? It can be benefiting, it could be benefiting for two different reasons. Either it will be a part of enhancing my organizational performance. Because of this, my organizational performance will be increased. This is one reason, it could be one reason. Or it will increases my revenue cycle. Anyone, right? So whatever the solution we provide for any customer across the world, you see, any technical application you take, these are the only two things. One is enhancing the organizational performance, at the same time increasing the revenue cycle. You can see any organization, any solution, any application we develop, end of the day it lands there. Either it is helpful to enhance the organizational structure and performance of the present this thing, or else it will be helpful to increase the revenue life cycle, either directly or indirectly to the client. So if you are a product owner, assume that if you are a product owner, the very first thing you need to know is that you need to define the goal and vision of the product. This is the first thing. What must be the goal I want to reach, followed by vision. Normally, this goal is of two different types. Business goal, project goal, two different things. Being a product owner, the focus must be a business goal, not the project goal, because you are nothing to do with project implementation, all that. Because you are a business owner or you are a product owner, you have a business goal. This is what I want to achieve, or this is what I want to reach in coming years, or in coming months, or in coming days, or in coming hours. This is what your business goal is. At the same time, vision, right? So based upon the business objectives goal, you will be having a vision, because every organization is depending on three things. Any organization you take, inception of the organization will be depending on three different things. Because you take any organization, goodwill of the organization will also be elevated on three things. They have to be withstanding on these three. One is objectives and goals, point number one. Second, vision, followed by the mission. Right? Mission means how they are performing. Vision, what they want to become. Business objectives and goals means what they want to So every organization, whatever the decisions they take, business decisions, everything must be within this thing. Then only the company has a goodwill. Because maybe sometimes uh, organizations may lose financially sometimes, but end of the day, goodwill, not, we cannot count goodwill in each and every time relating to monetary, right? Financially, of course, financials required for any organization, for sure. I think there is undisputed fact. But if you are talking about the goodwill of the organization, it's completely depends upon the kind of activities they are performing and what kind of services they are providing end of the day, right? So without deviating their vision, without deviating their business goals and objectives, followed by mission, right? So there are some policies, principles, all that which you have to abide with. So that should be the structure, right? So if you are a product owner, first of all, you need to understand, you need to define the goal and vision of the product. So what is that finally we want to achieve if someone is developing a product to us? This is what the first point. So that clarity should be there. That clarity should not should not miss for whatsoever reason. Point number one. Now, once the goal and vision is done, a product owner is the person who has to create epics followed by user stories, all that. Normally, let's say a point of sale system is what a customer is requirement. Customer requirement means PO requirement is that they want someone to develop a point of sale system. Developing a point of sale system, there is a hidden goal, right? So there is a business goal and vision which was already clear for customer. They have, because they conducted meeting, right? So they have before, because see, you are a, for example, you are a business owner, you are giving in a project to some client. So you are identifying some vendor to develop solution for your project problem. What is that you do? Being a business owner, your team will decide first to discuss, right? So what are our problems, right? So what kind of solution are we expecting? So situation of the business, everything. So first of all, you need to have a clarity. Otherwise, you don't come, you don't go for blindly. We don't go directly to the vendor and ask to develop a solution, right? So we need to have some clarity, because when you go to the vendor, client vendor will ask you, boss, what is that you want, right? So what is that you are expecting from me? At least to that, at least for that extent, we need to know about this. So goal and vision is required. Point number one. Developing a POS system is what the thing they have decided. Assume that. Now, if you want to develop a point of sale system must be having some features and functionalities, isn't it? What are the features? For example, these are the features. Let me explain you it. For example, these are the features. Let's say it's a cloud-based application, right? Cloud-based POS system. These are the features: CRM and loyalty, right? Franchising and multi-location, hardware and cash registers, inventory management system. So these we call it as features, right? Large scale of solution is what we call it as epic. Okay, epic nothing but, normally we call it as feature, but in agile we call it as epic. Epic nothing but large scale of solution. Large scale of solution is what we call it as epic stands for. Epic means this. Epic nothing but feature. You can understand that. In simple terms, epic nothing but feature. Large scale of solution is what we call it as epic. Right? This is first thing. Now, if you want to develop a feature, what is that you require? You need to have some features and functionalities. Means you need to develop some functional and non-functional requirements. If you speak about epic is nothing but a feature, for example, right? If you talk about this as a feature, every feature should be having some functional and non-functional requirements. Functional and non-functional requirements. Because these functional and non-functional requirements must be developed. Then only the feature will be useful. Otherwise, there is no point of using the feature. I'll give you a simple example which is relating to non-epic, so that you guys will understand much better. Now, you have bought a car. You're driving a car, where you have used this car to drive to the locations wherever you want to go, right? So this is for that reason you have bought a car. Now, there was a device called GPRS tracking device, which was given by the customer manufacturer to you. For what reason GPRS tracking device is being used for? GPRS tracking device is a device which is used to show you the directions, because there will be some locations which are not known to you. If you want to reach the locations and all, there must be someone to guide. Who is going to guide you this? It is being guided by GPRS tracking device. Assume that GPRS tracking device is a feature, among different features and all, this is one kind of feature which is there in the car. Car nothing but project, right? Understand that. Now feature called GPRS tracking device. Now you are driving a car. You want to reach to the destination point, right? So for that, this device you want to use. This feature you want to enable, right? You have to use it. If you want to use this feature, what is that you require first? First, you have to enable the location where you are now. You have to select the location where you are now first. Point number one. Point number two, you need to select the location where you want to reach finally, right? So whenever you are selecting these two, you need to have an option for submit, right? So whenever you are submitting, click on the submit or OK button, whatever it is. It will show you the direction, how many miles or how many kilometers it will be taken for you to reach. This is what the road it will show. Next, you will be having a button called start, right? So whenever you start, click on the start button, it will tell you, right? So go straight, go left, go right, all that stuff. Once you have reached the destination point, it will give you a voice message that you have reached the location. This is either in the left or right hand side of yours, right? This is what generally the device is telling you. Now assume that nothing of this, whatever I have explained you so far, was not there in the feature called GPRS tracking. Is this having any value for that?
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides agile training mentored by industry experts, the course link of which is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
Right, so there doesn't have any value. So if you're talking about GPRS tracking devices feature, when this is be helpful, when this is be useful, there are some functionalities which has to be developed in this. Then only that feature has a value. Otherwise, it doesn't have any value. So what are those features? Whatever I have explained so far, so those we call it as functionality. So every feature must be having some functional requirements. Now, what is non-functional? Non-functional means how it should behave. Character of the functionality, how it should behave. This is what non-functionality. Non-functionality means performance, scalability, right? So all that comes under non-functional. Let's say you have reached the location and you have crossed even. After once you have crossed, after 3-4 minutes, you got a text message or you got a voice message. What do you feel when you are driving a car, which is located, which is the location which is not known to you, right? So you're driving the car. Anyway, you have an idea that anyway you get a voice message, right? But after 3-4 minutes or so, you got it. So what you feel usually, being a person who is driving the car, you feel that this device is not so accurate because it's not giving you the instructions to you prior, right? It's giving late. Maybe it could be for whatsoever reason. So what is that you see? You will be deciding based upon the performance of the device at that level. So what features and functionalities we are developing for any customer, end of the day, that has to be performed well, right? So you are developing for example, you are using an e-commerce portal for shopping, all that stuff. So you have chosen the products, you have kept all these in the cart. Finally, you have edited something, you have paid. Finally, you have decided the products. You paid the bill online using different payments mode. You have paid it. Now, once you have paid, if you normally the rule is that because normally these instructions, by why I'm saying all this, because non-functionalities will be explained by the client will tell you, right? For example, once customer has paid, within fraction of 2 or 3 seconds he has to get a reply message. What reply message? Thank you, thank you with shopping with us, so that you will be receiving your products in another 2 to 3 business working days to your doorstep, right? So this is what the message. Then only being a user, being a customer, you feel happy, right? Assume that it is delayed, right? So payment was paid, it was debited from your account, everything done, but you have not received any kind of reply message so far. What do you feel, right? So you may feel suspectable, right? Is it because it is deducted in my account but I didn't receive, whatever the reason it could be, right? So it was delayed, maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So if it is happening every time, right? So if it is happens one time, okay, fine. It may be because of server issue, all that. But assume that, understand and think that way, that it is happening every time. So what do you feel normally? You feel that it is inaccurate, right? So it's not so accurate as what we understood, what we think of. This is what we call it as non-functionality. So functional requirements are required. Non-functional requirements will also be there. So normally whenever we are preparing documentation, whenever a business analyst is preparing documentation, these functional and non-functional requirements will be prepared on the document usually. But whereas in agile area, as I mentioned you, there are no documentation and all everything. What is that we have to do? We are writing user stories. So what is user story? Means whatever the functional and non-functional you are writing, that is what generally we are writing in a form of user story. So what is user story? User story nothing but it's a short description of requirement. This is what user story stands for. User story nothing but short description of requirement. So epic has to be identified, right? So epic has to be created for every epic. Epic means large scale of solution or else as a feature, whatever it is. So for every epic, what is that you require? You need to have multiple user stories, either functional or non-functional requirements. You need to develop some user stories for that. What is user story? User story nothing but short description of the requirement. For example, customer wants you to develop a login page, right? This is one thing. So how you are going to show this? Assume that you are a product owner, right? You're all belongs to the product owner. Assume that you're all product owners. You want to explain the same thing to the technical team. How do you do that? In what way you'll be presenting this? This you are presenting in a form of writing down the user story. User story very simple. How to write user story that I'll be explaining after the next session onwards. You'll be knowing it. How to write user story. To write a user story, there is a template we follow that I'll tell you later. Okay. So writing down the user stories, all that stuff has to be done by the product owner. So there will be epic followed by epic. There will be user story. This is what generally we write. But user stories can also be minimized. That's a different thing. User story can be minimized into task. Again, task can be minimized into subtask. All that we can do. Because whenever we feel in real environment that user story is having a complexity, in order to reduce the complexity, whatever you do, that user story will be diluted, means divided into multiple chunks. Those we call it as functional tasks, right? So again, those tasks can be divided into subtasks. So that's a different story. Let us not go into that. So creating of epics, writing down the user stories is what generally a product owner has to do. This is the second point. Now, next, creating and maintaining product backlog. This is also a responsibility of the PO. What is product backlog? Product backlog, nothing but it's a repository to store all the user stories. Repository, store all the user stories. This is what generally product backlog stands for. Because, for example, we were writing multiple user stories. This may be crossing somewhere 40, 50, 60 user stories we were writing. Where are we storing? We have to store it somewhere. Where are we storing all that information? That storage is nothing but product backlog. Product backlog, nothing but it's a repository to store all the user stories in that. So you are storing all the user stories so that based on the prioritization and all, whatever the sprint planning and all, everything we do will comes under next. Okay. So being a product owner, the major responsibility we do is that first of all, we have to define the goal and vision of the product. That is the first thing being a product owner you have to do. Unless until if you are failed in doing this, the project or the work what we are going to do will be under the doldrums, right? So goal and define a vision of the product is important. Point one. Next, you need to develop epics followed by the user stories. This is second. What is epic? What is user story? I have told you. How to write and all everything that we discuss it later because our discussion is confined totally into what are the roles and how it functions. Right? So how to write and all comes under the next level. How to write user stories. For that, there is a three-step procedure is there that we follow. At the same time, when you want to write a user story, there is a principle, invest principle is there. So based on the invest principle, because user stories cannot be written like as what we feel, right? Because it must be having a value, it must be having a quality. Then only that user story will have an identity and recognition. Otherwise, there is no part of it. So user stories, that there is something like I'll tell you later, right? So this is user story. Next, whenever you are writing down all the user stories, there must be a repository to store all that. So where are we storing all that? This is where we call it as product backlog. So you are creating a product owner. Product owner, if you are a product owner, you have to define the goal and vision of the product is your responsibility. You need to write down, understand the epics followed by the user stories, creating and maintaining product backlog. So this is what generally being a PO, you're responsible. So most of the people who are from a business analyst background, we landed here. If you're into Agile, this is most of the times you'll be a product owner in majority of occasions, I can say. Right? This is one thing. Second, next role will be called as Scrum team. What Scrum team is? This is where this is what I have told you, right? Cross-functional teams, like both developers, testing team, even sometimes you may be having a business analyst, architects, right? User interface designers, UI and UX designers, right? User interface designers. All these people will become under Scrum team. Means people who are responsible to complete the amount of work which was given to them is what we call it as Scrum team. Scrum team, nothing but development team. In simple words, because we are talking about Scrum. That's the reason why we are talking about Scrum team. Right. So when people are using Kanban and all everything, they call it as development team, not Scrum team. Because Scrum, the reason Scrum team. Otherwise, it is considered and called as development team. What is development team? Development team, nothing but members who are combination of all those people will be under the same team. So these people should have an expertise multitasking. That is what I told you in the beginning itself. Multitasking is what essentially needed for the team members to perform, right? So if you are a team member, if you are a Scrum team member, you must be capable enough to do it right from the analysis part to deployment and delivery. You have to be involved in each and every stage. Means you must be capable enough to handle all that stuff. This is what generally the Scrum team responsibility is. Normally, these people will be somewhere around 7 to 8 people in percentage for one team I'm talking about, right? If you have multiple teams, 7 into 2, right? So this is how it is, right? So every one team, you will be having somewhere around 7 to 8 people. In simple terms, like 2 developers, 2 testing team, maybe 1 database designer, user interface designer, maybe 1. Sometimes they'll be hiring a business analyst also, right? So because one business analyst is a product owner, you maybe require one BA who will be with the team members to coordinate different things. Depends on their interest, depends on their business. They'll be adding people. But the team members who are in the Scrum team members are responsible to complete whatever the given task to them. Means whatever the task, normally these tasks will be divided as a sprint. Usually we call it a sprints. Sprint development, all that stuff comes into picture. That I will tell you. So usually whatever the activity, means in simple terms, whatever the task given, the task completion is the responsibility of the team. Decision should also be taken by them. Normally in traditional model, if you see, project manager or project management team and all everything will decide. Right? Project planning, all that will be decided. Responsibility will be more on their shoulders. But here is Scrum team is a self-organizing team. So there is nothing called boss, there is nothing called pressure, all that. Of course, they have a pressure because in the beginning also I told you why tactically, because as I'm into agile coaching, because I am an agile coach now. So what I could see closely, because I am dealing with a lot of clients, I'm dealing with a lot of business owners, all that stuff. What I could see is that why they are wanting to transform their organizations or the projects into agile, because they want to make everyone accountable, responsible. Because see, slowly when I am putting pressure, see, I want to make you accountable and responsible for the deeds. What is that I have to do? I need to give you responsibility for everything. So I'm giving responsibility, automatically you will be accountable for sure. Right? So I need not do anything for you. Right? Simply if I do that, you will be accountable and you will be, it means this is the persons who are not right, I'm saying, right? So this is for not in a negative sense. Some people try to escape, right? So people say that this is not my work, this is not mine, all that stuff. For them, this agile is the right one because they are accountable for everything, they are responsible for everything, responsible and accountable for everything. That's the reason why multitasking is required. Means whatever the piece of work was be given to them, they have to complete within the timelines. That is what generally Scrum team must be capable of. So whatsoever reason, for example, if I'm giving 2 weeks time, at any cost in 2 weeks, you have to complete. End of the day, for that, what is required? Team spirit, team management is required, team effectiveness, right? Team dynamics. All these were matters. So no individual performances will be identified or recognized in Agile. Agile 100% team effort. Self-organizing team. Whatever the decisions they are taking, everything is belongs to them. What work to start, what to initiate, everything, that responsibility, everything will be on their shoulders. Normally in the traditional model, that's not the way. Task will be given, these people will do it. But here, whereas in Agile and all, responsibility will be given to them. So it is everything in their on their shoulders. They are the responsible persons of the deed which is being initiated, which they have to work on. So they are responsible for everything. This is what generally Scrum team stands for. So right from analysis, planning, design, implementation, testing, deployment. If they are completing 2 weeks, for example, if I have given a task where I'm asking you to complete in 2 weeks, means 2 weeks, the whole thing has to be completed. You cannot say that I just, excuse me, I do, you cannot say that it is analysis or planning design. 2 weeks, that particular task, whatever the user stories we have given to you guys have to be completed in 2 weeks, everything, right? So testing, everything has to be completed and you have to put it straight. This is where generally cross-functional teams, this is where generally these teams called as cross-functional. Cross-functional means everybody are involving in these activities and all. These people target is to reach whatever the goal and vision which product owner has defined. If they are failed in doing it, so there is no point in working on it, because product owner will always have a right to cancel it anytime. Whatever the sprints they have defined and all, they can, product owner will have a right to cancel anytime. So that is what generally product owner will have that authority over the team, all that stuff. So Scrum team is responsible for that. Now Scrum Master. Scrum Master nothing but more or less a project manager role. No, I'm not comparing project manager to Scrum Master, because project manager roles, responsibilities, authorities will be different, practically speaking. But Scrum Masters doesn't have that, because that's the reason why Scrum Master will be called as, like what I can say, like Scrum Master will be more or less like they are licensing the team. That's it, right? So they are licensing the team and whatever the requirements they want to have, right? Something like assisting the team, right? So whatever the challenges they are facing, all that will be taken care of by the Scrum Master. So Scrum Master is some more or less I can say a project manager role. I can say more or less to that extent possible. More or less as a project manager role is what generally Scrum Master do. Usually Scrum Master is the one person, but Scrum Master responsibility and role is more important in Agile, because they have to manage the team first of all. First point, right? So they need to understand whether these people are capable enough to complete or not. Because some people recruitment will happen usually, but we never know whether these people are capable to do it or not. Some people will hesitate to do, some people are reluctant to work, right? Some people will have some pressure, right? Because they are technically strong, but these people will be, there is more pressure, automatically these people will raise their hands. This different, right? So we have behavioral traits, especially in Agile, especially because we are, if you can take mine as a profile, I can say I was a Scrum Master earlier, then I was turned as myself as an Agile coach. Now I'm an Agile coach exclusively, right? This is how my transformation is. So if you see a Scrum Master role or an Agile coach, because Agile coaching experience should also be there for a Scrum Master. So these people should also have experience in understanding the behavioral traits of the individuals. Behavioral coaching, all this comes under Agile, because it's not something like managing the team and all. You need to understand the behavioral traits of the individuals, because some people are technically strong as is stated, but they are not there. There is more pressure, gone, right? So they can't work. Some people doesn't have any technical knowledge, because not to that extent possible, but they know how to manage things. So we have to deal a lot of people, and at the same time, you have to make people to work in the stipulated timelines which was given here, all that stuff. Same time, Scrum Master is also having a responsibility to track the progress what is being given to them. Because, for example, 2 weeks is the time I have given. I have to make sure, if I am a Scrum Master, I have to make sure that you guys have to be completed this work on time or not. I have to see. If you're not completing the work, what will happen? Whatever the release date we have given will be a failure. So being a Scrum Master, I am responsible for all these. So I have to track the progress of the work, velocity, right? So velocity means, let's say, for example, there is one sprint I have given. Right? What is sprint? I'll tell you later. Next session, I'll tell you what is sprint. There are different things. When I explain about Agile planning process, you'll be knowing about all this here, because we are confined only to the roles and responsibilities. So I'm explaining all these things to you in the session. So velocity means, for example, there is a sprint which was given 2 weeks time. 4 user stories I have given. You guys have completed only 3, 1 is left. Even on the next sprint also you did the same. 4, 3 completed, 1, for whatsoever reason. If this is the case, I may be having a doubt that you guys cannot complete release planning, whatever the release planning we have, we may be failed. So what is that I have to do? Being a Scrum Master, I have to do this velocity planning, all that. Right? I have to see what is that I have given, what is that you have completed, where is the balance, what is the balance. So if this is the case, these people are capable enough to complete within the stipulated time or not. If not, what are the things to be taken care of? Means how many sprints additionally I have to create. All that I have to do being a Scrum Master. So Scrum Master is a different role and different content altogether. This is separate. So this is what generally Scrum Masters do. Scrum Master, or more or less, I can say something like a project manager job. Scrum Master like a project manager job, where Scrum Master major responsibilities to manage the team, at the same time managing the regular works, right? Reviewing the sprints, all that retrospections on that. Same time tracking the progress of the work, velocity, all that stuff will be done by the Scrum Master. So these are the three different roles. But apart from all, above all, Scrum Master should make sure whatever the given timelines, whatever the goal, as well as the vision which product owner has, the Scrum Master always try to achieve it. That's what generally the connect must be. So then only Scrum Master role will be successful. Otherwise, there is no point of success here. So these are the three different roles. So all put together, somewhere around 9 to 10 people you will get. One team consists of 10 people. One product owner, 78 people of team, one Scrum. This is all about the roles of Agile. Now, when we talk about Scrum, due to the roles which was divided into three different parts, which make people to understand much better, because a person who is coming from the traditional environment, traditional project development, can adjust to the Scrum framework and all everything in an easiest manner comparing to the other ones. The reason why most of the people tend towards Scrum due to one reason. The reason of imparting Agile, Scrum under Agile and all everything is due to one reason is this. At the same time, flexibility of development and whatever the works we are doing and all everything will be in a form of user stories. Right? This is what generally user story stands for. User story nothing but a short description of requirement. This is what generally user story is all about. So that user story development, everything can be done in Agile environment, especially in Scrum framework, which is easy for the team members to understand the process well in advance. That's the reason why most of the people go for Scrum due to that reason. But in that Scrum, whatever the roles I have mentioned so far, we call it as Scrum, Agile roles, but majorly towards Scrum. Because if you see XP and Kanban, because this also I have explained you earlier, because if you can see three major ones in Agile, one is Scrum, second is XP, third is Kanban. So Agile is a prominent one. These roles you can see. But in reference to the roles, when we are comparing among with Scrum, XP doesn't have any role specific. Like you don't see any kind of product owner, Scrum team, Scrum Master, all that. There will be a development team as a whole. So that development team responsibility is to complete the whole thing, right from the requirements understanding and completing the works and all everything is completely towards the development team itself. But apart from that, of course, they are using different software development methodology, something like pair programming, TDD, all that stuff. That's a different story. At the same time, we have another process called Kanban methodology. Even in Kanban methodology, you don't see these kind of roles. What are the roles we can see and all everything won't be there in Kanban. So again, Kanban has a development team will be there. So the team itself will be looking after all the things. Here we are writing down the user story, but there you don't write any user story or something of that sort. Directly task will be taken and it will be implemented accordingly. Of course, every framework and process has its own pros and cons anyway, that you know well. So whatever the roles we have discussed is product owner is the first role, who defines the goal and vision of the product, writing down the epics user stories, maintaining product backlog, all that. Next, we call it as Scrum team members. It's a combination of developers, testers, user interface designers. It's a cross-functional team, I can say. Scrum team is all about a cross-functional team where people must have multiple skills, because if you are a developer, you cannot confine your responsibility only for development. You must be capable enough to handle other activities also when it is needed. So cross-functional teams and multitasking is more required in Scrum team. So whatever the development of implementation in reference to the project itself is concerned, everything will be looking after by the Scrum team itself. Followed by this, the third role, as I mentioned about Scrum Master, more or less something like managing the team, right? Tailing whatever the task team is doing and all that, managing the task, followed by this whatever the review, how much work they have completed so far, what is the balance of work. So whether are these people were capable enough to complete it or not. If there is any kind of doubt instance, what are the other strategies to be implemented to make to implement in real environment to make it complete within the specific release. So for that, how to track the progress of the work velocity, all that will be looking after by the Scrum Master. So these are the three different roles will be there in Agile in reference to the Scrum framework. Now, apart from this Scrum framework and all, let me explain you there are things like something like Scrum Ceremonies, because whatever the implementation of work we do, especially in reference to the Scrum and all, will be of majorly of to few different things. One is about Scrum Ceremonies. Second is we call it as Scrum artifacts, all that stuff. So there are two things we need to discuss under Agile Scrum. One is Scrum Ceremonies, second is artifacts. So Scrum Ceremonies means how project is implemented or how product is implementing in Scrum. We'll explain about these Scrum Ceremonies and all. These are the standard procedures which normally we follow when we are following a practice of Scrum. So it starts with sprint planning. This is the first Scrum ceremony. So followed by this, we do daily Scrum meetings. Sprint planning means where we do the detailed planning of sprint, all that. So of course, that will be explained in next slide. Whenever I'm explaining about Agile planning process, you will be knowing about the detailed part of this. So the first is sprint planning, where we do the whatever the sprint we need to develop and all, everything will be planned. So followed by this daily Scrum meeting, we call it as. Daily Scrum meeting, nothing but, especially in Agile, if you see in the traditional model, the difference is that there is a regular interaction with the team members happens. This is about sometime between 15 minutes every day. Normally we discuss like this is what generally we call it as daily Scrum meetings or Scrum meetings. Different ways people will pronounce that. Normally we conduct meetings. So the advantage of meeting is to interact with the team members who are involving in the project, so that it will be easy for us to interact with the people and we will be knowing about what are their inputs and what is the task to be done to be today itself. If there is any kind of challenges they are facing and all, how to overcome those challenges. All these things comes under daily Scrum meetings, all that. This is the second ceremony. The third, we call it a sprint review meeting. Review meeting means whatever the review process and all happens here, followed by retrospection, all that. So these are the major Scrum ceremonies which normally we follow. If we are following a practice of Scrum, in reference to the product development, we are working on Agile environment. Apart from the vision creation, product vision, all that stuff, these Scrum ceremonies has to be followed by the team members for sure. So the team members, in reference to the Scrum team member as well as Scrum Masters, majorly these are the two different roles will be played an important one. Of course, product owner will also be employed, will be also be involved, but in the level of sprint planning initially, not in the level of daily Scrum meetings, review and retrospection. Because as I mentioned, product owner is the person always try to see in what way we have to satisfy the customer and all. So review, yes, review meetings and all, everything, product owner will be involved, followed by retrospection, all that stuff. Not majorly into retrospection, but review meeting, yes. Review meeting, product owner will be allowed, attended. But major role will be played somewhere in the sprint planning, because whatever the products, backlog items do we have and all, everything will be planned there itself. So these are the different Scrum ceremonies which normally we follow in reference to the Scrum itself. So apart from the Scrum ceremonies, there are some Scrum artifacts, we call it as. Scrum artifacts means whenever we are implementing Scrum, there are some artifacts we follow. Because if you want to implement something in sprint planning, what is that you want to implement? For what reason you are implementing? What items are we taking and all, everything comes under the product backlog. This is the first and foremost thing we normally follow. So product backlog is one thing. From product backlog, we have sprint backlog as well as the sprint increments, product backlog increments, refinement process and all, everything are the three things. So these are the three different things will be there in Scrum artifacts. So when we are implementing up the products and all, everything in Agile, not only the value system of Agile, values, principles, all that what we have discussed so far. Along with that, one must be knowing about the artifacts of Scrum, followed by the Scrum ceremonies, all that. Right. So this is what about the overall view about the Scrum. So why Scrum are we using, for what reason, and what is the value system Scrum is having. So what focus we are focusing more on, all these things has comes under the Scrum part. So now today I'm going to explain you about the planning process, because how different Agile planning will be in reference to the comparison to the traditional model. Because in the traditional model, if you remember when I explained about the SDLC process in the beginning, I hope you might have understood like analysis, planning, design, implementation, testing. right? This is how generally the process happens. That's what generally the structure we follow in traditional approach. But whereas when it comes to the agile approach itself is concerned, it is something different. It's not something based on the traditional approach what we follow. It is not something of that sort, because the traditional way of approach is completely different to agile. Because agile majorly focusing on the release part. Because if you take a project, let's say for example you are developing an core banking application for one of your customers, you are not developing all the application at a time. So what is that you are doing? You are breaking down into releases, right? Release 1, 2, 3, 4, so on. So based upon the release planning what we have made so far, implementation will be taken place. So the release planning, especially if you see traditional to agile, when you are comparing traditional to agile, the major difference you can see is about release part. Means release planning will be made. So based upon the release planning and all, implementation will be taken place. This is what generally. So there is a difference you see from traditional to agile for very clear, because that's the reason why adoption and adopting towards agile planning process would be difficult for members to understand, because the transformation itself is a difficult and challenging task for many of the people due to multiple reasons. Due to might be they may not have towards exposure towards the agile environment earlier, might be reason they may not be ready to face the challenges within the stipulated time to complete. Reasons might be indifferent, but of course, whatever the reasons it could be. So one end of the day, people have to understand the process of agile environment well in advance before they want to implement.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides agile training mentored by industry experts, the course link of which is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
So if anybody wants to move towards the agile environment, so they must be knowing about the planning process of agile first. So what are the steps? Means whatever the sprint planning, review, retrospection, whatever I have told so far, along with this product backlog, right? So whatever the items we have discussed even in the last week and this week as well till now. So everything will be a part of the agile planning process, which will be as different steps. The steps of agile planning process will be as follows. This is what generally agile planning process. Let me explain you an overall view. So this agile planning process completely into 7 different steps. Total 7 steps will be there in agile planning process. Means if you are implementing a product to the product, a product in the any kind of you're developing any kind of product for customer requirements, all that stuff. The agile planning process will be divided into 7 different steps. So this is for me, you make it to understand much better. So I have just divided into 7 different steps so that you guys can understand well in advance. The first we call it as product vision and scope. Second is about building out the product roadmap, followed by this release planning, which is essentially important as I mentioned earlier. At the same time, sprint planning, daily stand-up meetings, review and retrospection. So these are the 7 different steps you can see in agile planning process. Now let us understand how it is different from the traditional one to agile. Because in traditional one, as you know, there will be a phase where we call it as analysis phase. Analysis phase means where we are trying to understand the business problem from the customer, right? So we need to understand the existing process, what was their existing process, right? So we need to study about what is their proposed system solution they are expecting. All that normally being a traditional team we study. But here, when it comes to the agile planning process, there are 2 different things we need to understand. So one is about the team who are involving in implementation of the product. At the same time, even you can see from the customer end also. This is where generally these product owners, all these people will be involved. Now, the very first step, especially in agile planning process, when we want to implement an application or a product in agile planning process, the very first thing is that we need to have a clear understanding about the product vision and as well as the scope. This is essentially important for any of the product to start with. Why? Because creation of product backlog. In addition to the product backlog, creating the product roadmap for any of the project is essentially important. If you want to create a roadmap followed by the product backlog and all, a team means customer, I'm saying from the stakeholders and the point of view, they must be having a clear understanding about the kind of vision and the scope, what they want to achieve so far. Because if they are missing in clarity and understanding about the vision and scope, what they want to achieve in the future, right? So whatever the requirements and whatever the expectation they're expecting from the agile part and all, everything will become a failure, obviously, because you don't see any kind of connect between these two. Because product owner, not only a product owner, about to that stakeholders itself are in a state of confusion where they don't have a clear understanding about the vision and scope. Hence, obviously, the product will become a failure here. That's the reason why the very first step we need to understand about this is to create and as well as to understand the product vision and scope of the product. This is where generally the planning meeting will be conducted. In this planning meeting, there are few points we need to discuss. First of all, we need to understand the need and goal of the product to be achieved. So whenever we need to understand about the need and goal of the product, we have to understand about few different things. The first point in reference to the first point, I'm explaining this here. So the first point we call it as clear about the business need, all that, right? So first point is this. Yeah, first point is about clear business need, end goal, and how to achieve it. Now, if you are a stakeholder, if you are the customer, wherein you want someone to provide solutions for your business problem, the very first thing you need to have a clear understanding about the business need, followed by the end goal. So when you are trying to understand about the business need as well as the end goal, this may be for two different things. For example, as an example, I'm just taking here. For example, first point, customer type 1, I can say, right? I can write it as type 1. Because this business need as well as the scope, goal and all everything will be for based upon the two different types. First is customer has a product and expecting someone to enhance it. This is the first point. Means type 1, customer has a product. At the same time, customer is expecting someone to enhance it. Means here there is an existing application which was there for the customer for a very long time. Customer is using an application for very long. Let's say there is a core banking application which customer is using for very long. So now, due to the business process changes, whatever happens, customer wants to upgrade this application to the next level. Assume that, roughly I'm saying. So what is that we want? First of all, you need to know about what customer wants to enhance and for what reason. Customer has a product and expecting someone to enhance it to the next level. It means they are expecting some features to add, right? This is the first type of thing, right? Now the goal will be different. That's the reason I have told you, because when it comes to the goals, there will be two different goals. One is about the business goal. Second is a project goal, right? So two different things we need to understand, because most of the people will have a confusion here. So one is business goal. Second is a project goal. Business goal is what client having, right? So this is what generally business goal means. What they want to achieve in their business is what generally the business goal is. So towards the business goal, if they want to invest some kind of money to be invested to have some solution and all, obviously they'll be investing on the product, whatever the project or a product goal, whatever it is. This product goal must be understood and defined by the team who are implementing and all. They should understand. So there must be a proper alignment as well as the connectivity between the kind of business goal what customer wants to achieve in connection to the product what we are going to develop. If you don't have any connection between these two, obviously it leads to a failure of the product, because customer is having a product. Assume that in the first case or in the second type might be anything. Customer is having some goal which they wants to achieve finally, right? So which for that reason he is investing some amount of money to develop some product for the future needs. So that must be the product goal when someone is trying to develop the application. If those two have two different understandings, obviously it leads to the product failure. That's the reason why there is two different things. One is business goal from the customer perspective as well as the product goal from the implementation perspective. So two different things. So being an implementation team who is trying to understand and who is trying to provide solutions for this kind of projects, products, all that stuff, they should understand the kind of business goal what customer wants to achieve finally. Unless until otherwise, developing a product and all according to the needs of the customer and all would be really difficult and challenging. So this is what the point here. So the first type is this. Second, type 2, customer is expecting us to develop a new application. Normally this proposal we may get from the customer or we may be providing. I'll give you an example between two things. For example, there was an application called core banking being used by one of the bank for a very long time. Now their business model was there, but still there are some changes in terms of the lines of the services as added in recent times. Due to that reason, they wants to add some new features and functionalities into the existing ones. Whenever they wants to add some new features and functionalities, what is that they need to understand? They want someone to develop to new features and functionalities to the existing ones. Compatibility is the issue. This is where generally feasibility study comes into picture. Assume that you all belongs to the development team. Assume that I am the customer. I am expecting you to develop a core banking solution. There was an application called core banking where I'm expecting you to add some new features and functionalities. Assume that. Now, if I came with this proposal to you, you are into implementation. Understand this way, right? So you all belongs to the implementation team. What is the first thing you see apart from the financials, apart from the remaining things, all that stuff? See, first of all, you see the first point is about the technical feasibility. Financials, of course, that's required, but keep it aside for some time. Technical feasibility is what normally you consider first. What is technical feasibility? Assume that the application was developed on .NET. I'm using this from past 10 years. Now I'm expecting you to add some new features and functionalities to the existing one. The existing technology means either hardware or software may or may not support new features and functionalities because the system infrastructure was very old, may or may not support. This is point number one. So in reference, by understanding this, what is the thing you'll be saying? This is where generally technical feasibility comes into picture. Whether is it compatible or not, if it is not compatible, right? So what do you want to do? We have to propose to the customer that we are going to develop a new product for you as separate. Because rather than repairing the existing one, it is always easy for any team to develop a new application as fresh because requirements are very fresh from the beginning. So they could understand the requirements well in advance so that they can develop and build the product easily rather than understanding the architecture of the existing product, making changes out of it and all everything. Normally, it's a difficult and challenging task, but sometimes it happens. That's a different story. So being you are a technical team, you are into the development team where you guys are into the implementation side, where you always try to see in what way technically it is feasible for us to develop, right? This is where generally feasibility study comes into picture. So if I am a customer, if I am expecting some sort of solution from you guys, what is that first of all I need to have? Whether is it either I'm expecting you to enhance the new features, I'm expecting you to develop a new product as fresh, whatever it could be. I need to have a clear understanding about the kind of business needs followed by the goal, what I want to achieve finally. This is what, first of all, I need to have a clear understanding. Being a stakeholder, I don't say as individual, I can say like we need to have a clear understanding about whether do we have clarity on this perspective or not is what I need to know first. At the same time, I must be knowing about how to achieve it because being and expecting a solution from technical people, all that, being a stakeholder or being a client, I must be knowing about how this could be achieved because if any clarifications come across in near times in reference to the expectation of the product itself is concerned, I was the first person to answer those questions. I may be an individual or a group of people, whoever they are. So we need to have a clear understanding about the need of the business. For what reason am I expecting someone to develop the product, right? So business need. So when we talk about the business need, there are few things we need to understand. When we talk about the business need from the perspective of the client, I'm saying this, right? So first point, what is the need of me to make someone to develop a solution at this time? Point number one to be noted. So being a stakeholder, being a client, I must be knowing about this well, right? What is the need of me to make someone to develop the solution at this time? Second point, how important for me to use this at the present condition, because I am endorsing someone to develop the product. So how important for me, right? So how important for me? It's not only important, how immediate, because depends on my immediate need and all everything we will be knowing. For example, if I'm expecting a product to be developed as early as possible, whatever the model they were choosing and all everything will be different. End of the day, we are using Agile. So that is one thing, how immediate, right? So next, who are going to get benefit out of this, right? Means beneficiaries, right? We must be knowing about beneficiaries, etc. So when I'm trying to understand about the need, being a customer, being a client, or being a person who I'm expecting the product to be developed, so I must be having a clear understanding about for what reason am I developing, I'm expecting someone to develop the product, and how important is it to me, how immediate is it for me, right? And who are going to get benefit out of it. This is what generally in business analysis terms we call it as business case. Because again, I'm comparing with the traditional one, because there is a connect between traditional and agile will happen sometimes in between. The reason I'm trying to compare when it is required to the traditional one also. This is where generally in business analysis terms we call it as business case. Business case. We need to define the business case here. Normally in regular models and all, we call it as business case, defining a business case. Right? So defining the business case is what generally we do. So when we want to define a business case, especially in reference to your business, because I am explaining about the business need, so that hope it is helpful to you, so that I'm explaining this point to you. It's not a deviation, but in addition to that, because it's a traditional way of approach we follow. Whenever we follow a traditional way of approach, we need to define the business case first. So when you want to define a business case, first you need to understand the business situation. Understand the business situation. Second, list of problems, right? Next, the same point. How important for us at this level, someone to develop the solution, right? So this is one more thing we need to understand here. Now, how immediate? Who are the beneficiaries? Who are the beneficiaries going to benefit out of this? Right? What are the assumptions and dependencies? What are the different assumptions and dependencies? These assumptions and dependencies we have to think from two different ones. One is from the client side, other second from the implementation team, vendor side, right? What are the assumptions, dependencies? These are all comes under the business case here. So very first thing is that when we want to understand the business need of the customer, these are the points we have to focus more on. So understanding about the business need to have how to achieve it and what is the final goal we want to achieve. There must be the goal, whatever you are going to achieve must be a business goal, obviously, right? So the end goal has to be knowing. So that is what the first point is. The second point, you need to know about the scope of work followed by the vision. What is scope of work? Scope means scope we need to define nothing but scope, nothing but the possibility. Possibilities of developing solution is what we call it as scope. Scope of the means, do we have that scope to develop the product or not? Normally, when we talk about the scope we need to understand from two different ways. Assume that I am the customer, right? I am the client, wherein you guys, here all belongs to the development team. Scope will be defined by me as well as by you as well. Because scope means when I am giving some problem to you to solve that, all that stuff. First of all, I need to have a clear understanding about, do you have the possibility someone to develop the product or not? So that sort of scope we need to understand, because am I providing all the information to them? So do I have any kind of restrictions to provide any sort of information to them? If I'm not providing, if they have any kind of limitations in providing information and all that, how to go over about that? So that sort of understanding, first of all, being a customer, I need to have. At the same time, there are possibilities sometimes where I may be changing requirements in between. Right. So these sort of understanding is all concerned with the scope of the project from my perspective. So there are two perspectives. Remember carefully, listen carefully. So one is from the customer side. Scope of the project from your side is different, because you are into implementation team. You see the possibility, right? How to make it successful. Because for example, I'm assigning a task to you guys to complete. So when I'm assigning a task, what is the first thing you see? You see what are the possibilities, probability of success. So probability of success, you will be dividing into two different things, which is in your hand, which is not in your hands, right? Or not? What is in your hand, how you are planning, right? How you understood, what are your technical capacities or business capacities, how well you are organizing your time, your team, all that stuff. All these things comes under the capacities in terms of the internality, which is something relating to you. You are whole and soul responsible for that, right? So I am now responsible, which is in your control, which is in your territory. But there will be some situations which is not in your control. That's what normally we call it as out of scope. What was that? Volatility in requirements. As I stated just now, I have told you. Volatility. For example, customer has given requirements at this level. Assume that customer has changed requirements all of a sudden. What will happen? Whatever the scope we have defined and all, everything will get deviated, right? So whatever we want to implement something will get disturbed due to this, right? So if this is the case, what should I do? How should we proceed? This is point number one. Second, in purpose of understanding the requirements, gathering the requirements before we are implementation or at the time of implementation, if any sort of additional information we want to provide, is that easy for you to access, or do you have any kind of restrictions? Because especially if you see, the best example, especially healthcare or finance related products, when we deal, it's not easy to access their systems because they don't allow you to access their server systems, all that, due to different security reasons. But sometimes there are especially for technical team, I'm saying this, there will be some problem they come across, like because they need to have a sample data, they need to connect to the server and they have to test in a process of implementing the project. They want to do it, right? Some sort of live data is required. But normally some customers were reluctant due to different reasons, as I told you. Normally those are genuine reasons for sure. But they don't allow someone to access their system and all everything for whatsoever reason. So when we are trying to implement the project, this is where most of the times we get the problem here. This is what generally the kind of problem when we are facing when it comes to the out of scope. So scope of the project, when we are trying to understand, we have to understand two different. One is in scope, second is out scope. In scope means which is in your control. In your control, like project planning, your team, right? Technical expertise, the kind of model you are using, right? So the kind of technical infrastructure, whatever the infrastructure, desired infrastructure to develop the project, do we have sufficient or not? Is this your technical team is well equipped to develop the product? All these things comes under your control. End of the day. So if you are failing in doing so, that is your responsibility. But when it comes to the out of scope and all, there will be some conditions like changes in requirements. Volatility of requirements might be taken place. Sometimes changes in requirements happens. Second, not only changes in requirements, sometimes there are possibilities that there is a possibility that sometimes accessing of information, additional information may not be so easy. So this is what generally the scope of work from the customer perspective, because whatever I have truly explained you so far from the client, from the development team perspective, as for the first level, I have explained about the customer perspective. This is what generally the scope, followed by the kind of vision what they want to achieve, is what being a customer we need to understand. This is the second point. Now, whenever we are going to conduct the meeting, this is where generally planning meeting will be conducted. Of course, if you are in agile team and all, you are nowhere related. Point to be noted. Because if you are in an agile team, or whenever you are in a team, right, you are part of Scrum team or something of that sort, you are nothing to do with this. Because understanding about the vision and scope is important. How they are going to conduct and all, it's nowhere relating to you really matter. But when you are trying to understand about the agile planning process and all everything, how it happens and all everything should we know. That's the reason why we were discussing about these points. Otherwise, it is not required for you. But if you are a product owner, yes, it is required, because we never know out of people who are going as a product owner or a scrum master or team member and all. Right? So that's a different story. We don't know. So if you are a product owner, for example, maybe in future and all, you must be having a clear understanding about the vision and as well as the scope of the product, what we want to achieve. Hence, planning of meeting and all everything will be conducted here at the client location, where they have to focus on the target customers, right, who are going to use the application. Let us take a core banking target customer. When we talk about target customer, let us understand from the business user perspective. Normally, when you are developing a solution, or whenever someone to develop you the solution for any kind of product, we need to understand the user first. Target customers, users will be of two different types. Users, people who are inside the organization. Second, we call it as business users. I'll give you two different examples to you in reference to the user part. If you're developing a core banking application, who will be the user here? User will be a bank employees, right? They are the users, because core banking is an internal application used in the bank itself. It is not for the external usage. It's only for the banking transactions and regular intervals they'll be using it. This is what generally what we call the core banking application is being used for. So this is only for the internal purpose. Second, there will be some applications like something like e-commerce. If you take online shopping portal, something of that sort, generally users will be two. One, employees of that portal, because they are receiving the orders, right? So whatever the supply chain process and all, everything has to be handled by them. At the same time, business users, nothing but customer. For example, if I am a person who is developing a solution for some of the customers, something like online shopping, all that. So what is that I have to do? Sometimes not only a solution provider, sometimes I have to think from the user perspective. When we talk about user, again, I have to think in two different ways. If I am the person who is receiving an order, what is that I am going to do? If I am the person who is placing the order, what is that I'm expecting? Someone should be on the screen, right? So when you are developing some solution, when you are becoming a solution provider, it is not always helpful to you to think from the solution provider perspective. We have to think from the end user perspective, right? So you have to think from the end user perspective. If I'm the person who is going to use this e-commerce application, what is that I'm expecting someone to develop, right? So we need to understand, if I'm a person who is developing I'm expecting someone to develop the product. So first of all, I need to have a clear understanding about the target customers, followed by the need. At the same time, what was the name of the product, like category, what kind of product I'm expecting someone to develop, right? Under which category it falls into. At the same time, what kind of benefits I'm expecting from the product. Because if I'm expecting someone to develop the product, for sure there will be some benefits, right? I'm expecting some sort of benefits and all of it. So what are those benefits could be next. At the same time, we need to understand the primary competitive alternative. Is there any kind of alternatives we need to understand when we are developing some kind of solution in future? At the same time, what kind of who are the relevant people who are finally participating in the meeting, like planning meeting and all that? Who are the people? Because if I'm a business owner, I'm not only the one participating, right? Along with that, there will be some relevant stakeholders like other functional heads and all. Everybody will be attending. At the same time, key team members will be attending of the product. At the same time, there will be a role called PO. In the last time also, I have told you about the PO role itself. PO nothing but the product owner role. So this product owner will also be attended. So understanding about the vision and as well as the scope of the product is what one must be knowing. So before you are going to do the project, before we are going to develop any kind of product and all that, one must be conducting this meeting so that they'll be having a clear understanding about what they are expecting and what they're expecting the product must be finally, right? So that sort of clarity is required. So in agile planning process, the first step will be this. Point number 2, based on the clear understanding, based on the meeting, based on the inputs, what we have discussed so far, based on the final conclusions, what we have made out of this meeting, from here onwards, the responsibility of a PO starts. Because if you remember, I have explained you about the roles of a product owner. Right. So here I've told you, right, to define the goal and vision of the product, all that I have discussed in the earlier session. If you remember, this is where generally a product owner do. Means if I'm a product owner, assume that if I'm a product owner, as I have attended the meeting, I got to know what is requirement, right? So what is their expectation, everything known to me well. So being a product owner, what I have to do, whatever the vision, and what vision means, what is that they want to see in near times, right? That is what generally we want to have a vision. So I want to make that vision into a visual representation. This is where generally reality comes into picture. Means I want to make it real. If I want to make it real, what is that I need to have? I need to make it visual. This is where generally we call it as product roadmap. I'll give you an example to you. Of course, I'm not explaining Jira here. I'll explain Jira in some time. Maybe once it is done and all everything, I'll be showing, because there is an application in between. Anyway, I'm just explaining about the this part. I'm explaining about product roadmap to you. Let me introduce this Jira part. There is an application called Jira. Usually, it's kind of project management tool, bug tracking, which is widely used across industries for managing the project, all that stuff. When you see a product, for example, this is a high-level explanation I'm giving. So because I'm explaining about the project planning, I'm just showing you here. Right. So if you can go to the projects, how to create project and all, I'll show you. Means once everything is done, finally we go to that, right? How to create project and I'll show you that later. Let me show you. If there is an existing application called, for example, online shopping, right? This is one application. So this is where generally a roadmap has to be created. First of all, we have to create a roadmap. Roadmap means what are all, because based on this is whatever the epics you can see here, all that stuff. This is what generally the roadmap. This is what generally a roadmap stands for. This roadmap has to be created by the product owner. How this roadmap has been created by the product owner based on the kind of meetings they had earlier. Means this is where generally this creation of product vision, goal, all that stuff happens. Based on that, a product owner is the person who is responsible to build a product roadmap. This is how generally a product roadmap looks like. Means there are epics, user stories, all that stuff. I'll explain one by one later, right? So this is where generally the product roadmap. So whatever the vision and whatever, being a product owner, I have something in my mind. Means in my mind is that I am expecting an online shopping portal to be developed. Now, being a product owner, what is that I have to do? I have to make it into reality. Means I will have to create a product roadmap first. Product roadmap means what are all the features should be there in each and every product. For example, website option of mobile is required. Mobile website option is one kind of epic is required. Advanced navigation and search is one more epic I require. Superior photos and image options is one thing. At the same time, product descriptions or customer reviews, right? Checklist options. So these are the different epics, which based on the interaction as well as the discussion we had with the team, finally, being a product owner, I have decided that these are the epics majorly my customer means myself being a product owner. I am assume that I am the owner of the product, assume that, right? So if I am the product owner, this is what I'm expecting. So assume that you're all belongs to the technical team, wherein if you want to understand and to implement the product successfully, being a PO, I have to create this epic first. First of all, I have to create epic. At the same time, not only creation of the epics, I have to give some timelines also. These timelines, remember, were nothing but the estimation timelines. Because being a PO, I must be knowing about the rough estimation. Now, how much of the time it will be taken for the team members to develop, right? So what is the amount of time it will be taken for us to implement, right? For you guys to implement, because end of the day, implementation and all, everything will be done by you, accepted. But even though you are implementing the product, first of all, being a product owner, I need to have a clear understanding about the kind of effort estimation, how much effort estimation it will be taken for me to implement. That is what generally we must be having. This is what generally call it as rough effort estimation. Means how much approximately it will be taken for a team members to develop the product, the whole product, right? How much time it will be taken for them to develop the project is what generally the rough estimation time, all that. So the rough estimation time is what generally we must be knowing. This is what generally happens in the second level. Means being a product owner, what is that first I have done? I have understood the goal and as well as the vision of the product. Followed by this, I need to understand rough estimation time, right? How much amount of time it will be taken for me to complete the product. At the same time, how much effort it will be taken for someone to develop the product is what, first of all, I need to have. I need to know first. Now, based on this, I should also keep something in mind about the kind of goals and objectives. Means again, these goals and objectives will be two different types, as I told you.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides agile training mentored by industry experts, the course link of which is given in the description below. Now, let's continue with the session.
Whatever we discussed in the planning meeting is all under the business goal. Now, whatever the goals we are discussing here and all, everything comes under the project goal. Means based upon the business goals and all that. So what is the project goal and all, everything that we have to see. So the goals must be knowing. At the same time, we must be knowing about the objectives. Any project is being connecting with few things. First, objectives and goals. Second, need, followed by the scope. These are the three major aspects will be there for any of the project. If you want to develop any kind of product, if you want to develop any product to be successful in long run, so we have to focus on three different things. One is objectives and goals. Second is need. Third, followed by scope. If there is any kind of clarity which is missing in these three things, the product will be, even though product is developed, end of the day, it is not surviving the actual purpose what customer is expecting. That's the reason why you need to have a clear understanding about the kind of business goals. In connection to that, what kind of product you are developing, that product goal must be connecting to this. At the same time, what kind of objectives we want to achieve finally is what we must be knowing about. In this second step comes under the product roadmap, which is being done by the product owner for sure. At the same time, this product owner should have responsibility to create a product backlog. This is where generally product backlog and all everything comes into picture. Normally, before we are going for a product backlog and all, a product owner should have to should prepare or else should have an idea about the MVP part. This is where MVP. What is MVP? MVP nothing but minimum viable product. In other sense, I can say, like, because in Agile normally we call it as MVP, all that. Normally we call it as minimum viable product. Minimum viable product nothing but it's something like a prototype. For example, someone wants to develop an e-commerce portal, right? Something website or something. Normally, for a general understanding, I'm giving this explanation to you. For example, someone is expecting you to develop a website. Now, before you are going into a website or before you are going to develop the actual website, what is that normally happens sometimes? because if you are anybody come from that segment, will be knowing that well. You are developing a website to one of your customer. So when there is a negotiation taken place, whenever there is an interaction happened, before you are going for a full-time website implementation, what is that first thing they'll ask you? First thing they'll ask you to develop some prototype, isn't it? Right? So demo kind of thing. Prototype they'll ask you to develop first. So that prototype may not be the real one. Assume that, right? And there is no guarantee that prototype will be going on the next level, because this prototype will give you a clear understanding about how it looks like, right? So how it works from an external point of view is what generally prototype. So based on that prototype and all, what is that customer has given you the signal yes, next level will be implemented. The same prototype will be turned as a product, right? So turned as a website and we complete the whole thing. This is how generally happen. The same thing happens even in agile environment, but we call it as identifying the MVP, like minimum viable product. What is the minimum viable product which customer is expecting at this level? Means being a product owner, I have to understand creating an MVP first. I need to identify the MVP. This identification of MVP and all everything may not be the real one, right? So because there is no guarantee in agile that MVP implemented 100% as it is, because there may be some sort of changes and all happens in between, right? Because but to have a clear understanding about this, first of all we need to identify the MVP. This is what we call it as minimum viable product. So if you are a product owner, based upon the understanding what we have, first of all, you need to translate whatever the inputs you have taken and whatever the final conclusions you have identified so far, those you have to translate into product roadmap. So once you are creating product roadmap, if you want to create a roadmap of the product, you need to have few different things. One, you need to understand the epic, followed by the epic and all that. So you have to write down the user stories. If you want to write down the user stories and epics and all everything, first of all, you need to understand the actual solution which you are expecting someone to develop. So based on that epic nothing but I can call you epic nothing but a feature. Epic nothing but a feature. So again, in future, there are different functional and non-functional requirements will be there. Those functional and non-functional requirements will be called as user stories, right? So all these things and all comes under the product roadmap. So once the product roadmap has been created, we need to have rough estimation of timelines is required. At the same time, what is the goal of objectives and as well as the goals, what we want to achieve finally. At the same time, a product owner is the person who is trying to identify the minimum viable product, which is to be developed first. So based on the minimum viable product, next level product implementation will be taken place, because this is the base level to move on to the product to the next level, because this is the minimum thing which customer is required at this level, at this stage. It doesn't mean that it will stop to that extent. It will go to the next level, but this is the minimum viable product which gives a clear understanding about the high level view and high level understanding about the product, all that. This is what generally the second we call it as product roadmap. Is it clear to everyone? Any doubts in these 2 points? Any questions? Now, for example, let us understand release planning process here. For example, to develop a product itself taking 12 months. Okay, I'm making it simple so that you will be understood better. Right? 12 months. Now, 4 months, release 1. In 4 months, there is release 2. In another 4 months, there is release 3. Right? There is release 1, release 2, release 3. Now, if you are completing the whole product, it itself is taking 12 months. But whereas when we are doing agile implementation, whenever we are working in agile implementation, the planning process and all everything happens through release part. Release 1, release 2, release 3. Now, in the first release, assume that, right? In the first release, product owner wants few epics to complete. Product owner wants few epics to complete. You can take any of the product. Let's say, for example, let us take our point of sale system as an example. I'll show you understood better. Right? For example, yeah. Right. So, for example, this is a cloud-based point of sale system. Assume that these are the different features we have. Right? Different features we have. Now, customer is expecting a CRM is one thing. May not be required. All the user stories can to develop on the first level. Right? May not be. Now, for example, customer is expecting few epics here. For example, CRM loyalty, hardware in cash registers, maybe inventory management system. So these are the 3 epics required by the product owner at this level. So if you are taking 3 epics into consideration, how many user stories we have? We have 4 user stories here. Remember, again, I'm repeating, if you're taking about product backlog into consideration, because next thing what I'm explaining about product backlog, because product backlog, nothing but it's a repository to store all the user stories. Normally product backlog starts where? If you're talking about product backlog, user story is nothing but only functional requirements, even technical dates, even technical requirements, bugs, everything will be there in that. I'll be explained it later to you. Okay, now what is that we want here? For example, customer is expecting CRM loyalty is what wants to develop in the first level. Second, they want inventory management system. Third, hardware in cash register. These are the 3 different epics which customer is expecting us to complete. Now, how many user stories we have? Assume that functionality nothing but the user story. 4 plus 4, 8, 8 plus 4, 12. Right? So 12 user stories. So how many user stories? There are 3 epics. 3 epics to complete. Okay. Each epic, as per the case study I have shown you, I am writing here as an example. Each and epic, total 3 epics consists of 12 user stories. Nothing but 12 functionalities. Okay. Forget about technical requirements, all that aside. I'm talking about only requirement, functional requirement. I'm talking 3 epics to complete. Total 3 epics total consists of 12 user stories, because one epic may be having 4, one more having 4, one more having 4. 4 into 3, 12 user stories to complete. This is the first release. Now, when you talk about 4 months, how many weeks it is? 4 weeks into 4 months means 16 weeks, right? 16 weeks is what the time we have. 16 weeks is what the time we have. But when it comes to working days, because this is where generally sprint planning and all everything comes here. When we talk about this, you are converting into working days, how many? Usually 5 days per week into how many weeks? 16 weeks. 5 days in a week into 16. So 5 days in a week into 16. So which is coming around 80 working days. Because especially in Agile, whenever we are going for sprint planning and all, normally whenever we are doing the release part and all, we have to take working days into consideration. Now you could ask me one thing, why Raj, why you have taken 5 days a week? Because Monday to Friday is the working time. So Saturday, Sunday is the holiday. Hence, we have taken 5 days in a week, right? 5 days per week into 16 weeks. Means for 4 months, I'm talking about one release. Release planning happens in every release. The same process we follow, but whatever the user stories we have taken, whatever the epics we have taken might be different from one to another. It will not remain constant and same all the time. So roughly speaking, 5 days in a week into 16, 80 working days. This 80 working days, excluding holidays, any government holidays or festivals, all that comes, we have to exclude it. Then only we have to consider. Otherwise, because we cannot include all that, right? Excluding holidays, because if there is any government holidays or some other days and all that, so that has to be deducted. Finally, working days comes into picture. Now, in this 4 months time, 4 months nothing but 4 weeks into 4, 16 weeks. 5 days in a week into 16, 80 working days, excluding holidays. Assume that there is no holidays except Saturday, Sunday. Assume that there is no holiday, right? 80 working days. In 80 working days, product owner wants 3 epics to complete. Total consists of 12 user stories. This is where generally the release planning process will be initiated. Now, if you want to discuss about the release planning process and all that, who has to involve here? Product owner has to involve. Point number 1. Second, a Scrum Master has to involve, because Scrum Master is the person who is to manage the Scrum team and all. They have to involve here. At the same time, team members should also be involved. Scrum team members, all that. Why? Because especially in Agile, whatever the decision in reference to the implementation itself is concerned, everything will be taken care of by the development team, not by the product owner, nor by the Scrum Master. Scrum team members has to take a decision on how much time it will be taken, complexity, all that stuff will be taken care of by the people itself. This is where generally the release planning process and all everything will happen. Means if you're talking about 4 months is the first release, roughly speaking, to complete a product, wherein 4 months, product owner will give you the guideline to you. Product owner will tell you, in the first release, this is what I want. These are the 3 different epics which I am expecting you to complete. This, whatever the 4 months release and all that, if you're talking about 3 epics, these user stories may be different, right? So the sprints and all, everything will be different, because there are a few things we need to understand here. First point, what is product backlog? Few answers, few questions you need to understand. What is user story? If you know about this, you will be knowing what is user story, what is epic first, what is product backlog, next what is, right? These are the 4 things. Epic nothing but large scale of solution is what we call it as epic, right? What is user story? Short description of requirement is called as user story. What is product backlog? There are different user stories we are writing. For example, we have 12 user stories in 3 epics. Where to store all these? There must be some repository to store all that. This is where generally product backlog comes into picture. Now, what is sprint? Sprint nothing but collection of user stories which are we developing based on the priority. This is what we call it as sprint. Sprint in simple terms, you can consider it as module. I don't compare that sprint with module. Normally it won't, but assume that, right? For example, these sprints may be anyone, right? For example, if you have 4 weeks, for example, 4 into 4, 16 weeks. In 16 weeks, normally sprints will be calculated in a form of weeks. Normally, sprints will be calculated, implementation of sprints will be calculated into weeks. For example, this project we have taken, for example, some project, let us take some project here. Let's say, for example, hospital management system I have taken. Okay, for example, right? Now, there were different epics we have written, followed by epics and all, we have written the user stories also. So whenever we write user stories, what is that we have to do? Right. So here, this is where generally backlog is. Backlog means what are the user stories and all, everything will be there in this. Right. So this is all, whatever the user stories we have and all leftover user stories will be there on the sprint in the backlog. From here, what we have to do, we have to create a sprint. Whatever the sprint we want to develop, so these we have to push here. We have to push here. Means this is again based upon the priority and all everything. So sprint nothing but whatever the implementation based upon the time frame or time boxing thing we are following. For that, the thing is which is called as sprint. Means if you are taking this into consideration, for example, if you want to complete 4 user stories, 12 user stories in 3 epics will be formed in different sprints. Sprint will be form of 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks and all. For example, sprint 1 out of 12, right? 3 user stories, right? Next, sprint 2. For example, customer is expecting you to develop 4 user stories, right? And maybe sprint 3, 4 plus 3, 12. 4 plus 3, 12, yes. 4 plus 3, 7, right? 4 plus 3, 7. For example, 2 user stories we have taken sprint. So sprints, there is no guarantee like these many sprints it will be taken. So if you're taking sprint and all, it depends on how many user stories we have taken and how much effort it will be taken, all that into consideration. So whenever we are doing the release planning process and all, everything is depending on how many sprints we are developing. These sprints normally will be converted in a form of weeks. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and so on, right? So normally, for example, if you're taking 12 user stories, it can be like this. Sprint 1 may be having 3 user stories. Sprint 2 may be having 4 user stories. Sprint 3 may be having 2 user stories. 4 plus 3, 7. 7 plus 2, 9. For example, 9. Sprint 4 may be having 3 user stories, right? So 3 user stories. So to complete, if you can see roughly, if you want to complete these 12 user stories out of 3 epics, in the first release, how many sprints we have planned? We have planned 4 user stories, 4 sprints. It may not be 4 sprints. Sometimes it may be 6, it may be 2, it may be 3, it may be 4 even. Why? Because it purely depends on how many user stories we have taken. At the same time, what is the complexity which is involved to implement that? Because particular user story, nothing but the functionality. If you want to implement the functionality, what is that you require? There is an amount of complexity which is involved in it. Right? It depends on. So, for example, 3 user stories may be taking 2 weeks. For example, 4 user stories may be taking 3 weeks, 4 weeks time for you to come. 2 user stories, sometimes it may be taken 1 week for you to come. Maybe the 3 user stories may be taken 4 weeks time for you to come, right? So which is not something guaranteed, right? It's really because this planning, whatever the sprint planning and all everything, this will be decided by the team members. But when we are planning about the first release, means whatever the release we are planning and all, being a product owner, that's the reason why Product owner is being involved here. Why? Because product owner is the person is expecting you, this is what I want you to complete. Now, when it comes to the implementation part, who has to take the decision on this? This decision has to be taken by the team members. So team members should also be knowing about the release planning process in advance. Whether how many user stories they are developing, how many sprints they are developing in first sprint, second, third, fourth, and all everything. It depends upon the decision what they have made at the time of sprint planning. So before that, whenever they are completing the release planning process, product owner will give you the clear understanding about what is that is they are expecting, in how many days this has to be completed. Assume that if it is taking 4 month sprint, for example, in 80 working days, I want these 3 epics to be completed, which is a combination of 12 user stories. Now you could ask me one thing, Raj, is it only confined to 12 user stories? Don't you give any guarantee that sometimes more than 12 user stories will also be there sometimes? Yes, there is a possibility. That's the reason why whenever we are implementing in agile implementation and all, there are two different things. Some user stories and all everything will be in the sprint. Some user stories in real environment, normally what we say that there are out of sprint, means there are no in the sprint. In the initially sprint, whenever the sprint planning and all everything we do, these user stories won't be there. After that, these user stories will come and add in between. That kind of problem will also be arised. Means there is possibility. I don't say it's a problem. There is a possibility it may be arised here. So that's the reason why whenever we are doing the release planning process, in the release planning process, how many epics should be completed irrespective of the user stories. Of course, I have taken 12 user stories here. It may be 20, 30, 40, 50 and so on, right? So forget about that. How many epics to be completed in the first release? That decision will be given by the product owner, where this understanding and all should be there to the team members who are attending in the release planning process. Means either by Scrum Masters or Scrum team and all, these people should understand how many epics to be completed irrespective of user stories. Because how many sprints we want to develop, each and every sprint, how many user stories and all, again that is depends on the complexity of the particular user story, because that complexity is different, right? For example, even though there will be some simple requirements, something like login page creation itself looks very simple, but when it starts implementation and all, complexity might be increased day by day, because we have started, for example, right? Because login page, we don't feel much difficulty, but what will happen in practical possibility is that you could ask me, Raj, what complexity you can see in login page creation, because it looks very simple. So why it will be complex in future? Because what will happen whenever we are started, maybe the complexity might be less, but afterwards keep on some sort of requirements and some sort of changes happened in between, might be taken place. So what will happen, obviously, as there is a lot of changes are involved in the existing functionality what we are developing, automatically complexity will also increase. When there is a complexity increase, the effort, how much time people were spending to complete and all will also be increased. Obviously, when duration is increasing, obviously the timelines will also becoming very short. Understood? Clear, everyone? Is it clear to everyone or not? Normally in traditional model, what we do, once the product is completed, finally after the duration, after 12 months or so, normally finally we deliver the product to the client, normally speaking, in regular models, all that stuff. But whereas when it comes to the agile and all everything, we are doing releases wise. Point number one. Point number two, not only on the releases, if there is any kind of things to be added in between, there is a flexibility of doing the changes here. There is a flexibility of doing changes. Why there is a flexibility of doing changes? Because whatever the user stories, whatever the requirements we are writing, all these requirements are writing in a form of user story. User story is individual. User story is individual. So there is no connect with user story with other user story, right? If I'm writing a user story, this user story is no way connecting to other one. There is no connect. That user story is individual on its nature. So when there is an individuality, what will happen? Automatically, there are possibilities that can be changed at any point in time. Of course, effort is taking more, but there is a possibility that we can change n number of times, subject to terms and conditions, if it is being accepted by the team. Yeah. This is what generally the release planning process is. So release planning has to be done. So release planning, whatever the release planning process I have explained you so far, the same process happens in each and every release. Even it may be first release, second release, third, fourth, and so on. The release planning remain constant. Every time, whenever there is a release, the planning process is something inevitable. Okay, because there is no one release plan. How many releases we have? Those many release planning processes has to be made. Clear? In this release plan for the particular release, either it may be 1, 2, 3. So whatever the part of creating a release plan and all, this is a repetition one. First release that happens the same, maybe for the second release, maybe for the third release, and so on. Whenever how many releases we have, release planning will be continued the same way. I've just given the rough idea here, right? For example, if you're taking one release, so based on that, because how many epics and all everything, there is a dependency, right? So how many releases and all everything. So this is what generally release planning process is all about. Once the release planning process is completed, once the release planning is completed, the next part is that fourth is sprint planning. Fourth is sprint planning, right? So the release planning part and all everything, sprint planning. So whenever we are going the sprint planning, first of all, what we have to do, whenever the first part like creating this product roadmap, right? So creating release plan, all that, normally there is a concept called product backlog. This is where we have discussed here, but of course not in detail, product backlog. So what is product backlog? For example, there is a product called payroll management. Now task, what is task? Simplifying user story is nothing but task. Again, simplifying the task into subtask, because this is all to reduce the complexity. You are doing this, right? Simplifying the task. This is what we call it a subtask, right? This is what generally the roadmap is. Once the roadmap is created, what is that you are doing? You are writing down the user story. Where you have to put is we have to put in product backlog. What is product backlog? It's a repository to store all the user stories. Not only user stories, we can store anything, right? So this is what generally the product backlog is. So product backlog creation is what we have to discuss before you're going for sprint planning. Product backlog is there. So this is what the product is. For example, you're taking hospital management system. There are different epics. Epics have user stories. What is that we are doing? Whatever the user stories, everything will be there. All these things you can see in the product backlog. This is what product backlog means. It's a repository to store all the user stories. Whatever the user stories and all everything will be done under product backlog, right? So from product backlog, what is that we are doing from here onwards? Whatever the Scrum ceremonies I have told you, right? Sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint review, and retrospection will be taken place. Understood, everyone, right? Understood or not? Following, right? Goal and vision, followed by this product roadmap you have created. In this product roadmap, you have epics, user stories, all that, as I shown you on Jira just now, some time back. Next, from there, what you're doing, you're creating a product backlog in the same user story in the Jira itself. We are storing all the user stories in the product. From there, what you're doing again, from the product backlog, we are taking few user stories and we have to do sprint planning and all. Of course, sprint planning I have not started it, because what is product backlog? Why do we do product backlog? For what reason product backlog is to be done, I have to discuss now. So for that, there is a presentation for product backlog, which I am showing you. Let me explain that first. Confirm me whether you can see this or yeah. Can you see this product backlog? Right. So this is So this is what generally product backlog consists of. What is product backlog? Just to have told you, product backlog nothing but whatever the user stories are we writing. To store all the user stories, we require a product backlog. It's a repository to store all the user stories. But product backlog is not only for user stories, because user stories are nothing but functional requirements, isn't it? That's what I have told you in the beginning. But there may be some technical requirements also, right? Some technical requirements will be there. So technical requirements will also be there in the product backlog. For example, code spikes. Code spikes means, for example, some demo kind of work has been done by the team. So where are we that putting that information? For that information also we put it on the product backlog. For example, there is some technical doubts, technical debts, all these. That also will be there in the product backlog. So product backlog means this is what generally product backlog is. So product backlog means where in this product backlog, whatever the user stories we are writing, whatever the technical requirements, whatever the code spikes we have, whatever the technical debts, whatever the bugs may not be immediate. Maybe once the implementation has been taken place, whatever the bugs we have identified, all this can be stored in this product backlog. So product backlog refinement process, creation of product backlog, maintaining it, backlog refinement process, all that will be looking after by the product owner normally. But if you want to put something in the product backlog, what are all product backlog goes and all, this is how generally the structure is. Product idea, we have discussed earlier. Product vision, from there epics, discussed. Epics, we have discussed. After epics, we are going for user stories. So user stories, technical requirements, code spikes, technical debts, bugs, everything will be there in the product backlog. So product backlog creation and maintaining product backlog is what will be done by the product owner. Product backlog used as a repository between means once the product roadmap is being created. Once the product roadmap is being created, at the time of the thing, product backlog has to be created. We have to create a product backlog, product roadmap based on the release planning process. After that, sprint planning. Sprint planning in its development, what to develop, how much time do we have, how much manpower do we have, how much time do they have to complete, will there be any possibility for them to complete within the timelines or not, how much time it will be taken for the particular user story to complete, and for that how many story points to be given, and all everything comes under the sprint planning. So we have not even started sprint planning yet, remember, right? We have not started sprint planning. Actual sprint planning will be started after, not now. What is that we have done so far is that only about till release planning is what we have completed. So creation and vision on scope of the product is what we have created first. Next, we have to create a roadmap. Based on the roadmap, product backlog creations and everything will be done here. Based on that, release planning will be made here. Once the release planning, everything is done, okay, fine. We understood clearly that in another 4 months, this is what we want to do. Now, next is about sprint planning. In sprint planning, how many sprints we have to take, right? Because this is where I have explained here. If you remember, I think here I have explained, right? Here I have explained. Yeah. First, for example, how many? For example, 12 user stories we have. 3 epics we have. 12 user stories. For 12 user stories, how many sprints should be there, right? How many sprints? Each and sprint, how much time? So that is all these aspects and all everything will be discussed under the sprint planning. So whenever we are doing the sprint planning, this is where generally all these things will comes into picture.
Just a quick info, guys. Intellipaat provides agile training mentored by industry experts, the course link of which is given in the description below.